Just a minute. And we've assembled the best political panel this side of At Issue. Chantal and Andrew make me say that. NDP strategist Brad Leving is in Toronto. Conservative strategist Chad Rogers in Toronto as well. Liberal strategist Rob Silver here in Ottawa. And also in Ottawa, our very own Eric Grenier, who's been tracking this as he does. Okay, that's enough of me talking, because who wants to hear that? Let's get some opening thoughts from everybody here on the panel. Mike, let's start with you in the media room, because you've been reporting on this from the very beginning. What do you think each leader is focused on tonight? What were they telling each other? What were their war room telling each other tonight about what they need to do?
So Andrea Horwath is going to have a target on her back during this debate. They are very aware of this. So her goal is really to try to basically show that she can handle the pressure, to kind of be calm and unflappable when she is having both Doug Ford and Kathleen Wynne coming at her. Doug Ford, his real goal here is he's got to stop the bleeding in the polls. The PCs have been on this downward trend, according to the CBC's poll tracker, for a couple of weeks now, and what seemed to be a big lead has been frittered away. So Doug Ford's going to need to reach out to his core voters, but also those people who perhaps had some concerns about Doug Ford, and show them that he is ready to be the premier. Kathleen Wynne, look, she doesn't really have anything to lose in this debate, because she's the scrappy underdog now, potentially. So it would be interesting to kind of see whether is that gonna free her up a little bit to kind of, I don't know, go for it a little bit more and loosen up.
Okay, do we know anything about how they've prepared? I don't think we've seen Doug Ford out on the campaign trail for a couple of days now, so clearly he's been working.
Yeah, in fact, I spoke to some of his people just this afternoon, a couple of hours ago, and he was in prep, actually, just after 4 o'clock. His plan really is to definitely go after the NDP. In the words of some of his communications people, they want to hold the NDP to account for their tax promises, and to make sure that people are aware of issues with some of the NDP candidates. Interestingly, Andrea Horwath, her preparation has involved a lot of sitting around talking, as opposed to the mock debates, trying to figure out how they want to approach it. And their desire is, don't fix what ain't broke, because they felt she came across quite well in the first and second debates. So why not stick with the same plan this time?
Okay, thank you, Mike. We'll check back with you in a little bit. Let's get some opening thoughts, though, from our panel. I'm going to start with Eric, if I can. Eric, just because Mike alluded to the polls, and for people who maybe haven't been following so closely, just give us a sense of where we sit now and how quickly the Progressive Conservative Party seems to be slipping down.
Well, it is a big change in this campaign, because when it started, the PCs were well ahead of both the New Democrats and the Liberals. The Liberals and the NDP at that point were tied in that second spot, well behind, and the PCs were on track for majority government. But now what we're seeing is that the PCs and the NDP are more or less tied. We've seen some polls that have been out in the last few days. Some have put the NDP narrowly ahead, others have put the PCs narrowly ahead. But what we have largely seen is that the movement has been towards the New Democrats, dropping both the PCs and the Liberals, with the Liberals dropping to a support level which would be at a historic low for the party. What the challenge is for the New Democrats is to see if they can actually continue this momentum, because if it's a tie situation between the NDP and the PCs might be able to get more seats out of that because of how their vote is distributed. So for the New Democrats, it's to make sure that they haven't already hit their ceiling, and that they can keep chipping away from the PCs.
Okay, I'm going to start with, go next to Rob, if I can, because Mike didn't get to what Kathleen Wynne did to prepare today. I know she went for a run, which is sort of par for the course for her, something she does, I guess, to relax and get ready. What do you think she has to do tonight, though, Rob? Is there any way to make up what we're seeing, I guess, in the polls, or for her to gain some support back, or do anything to improve her fortunes a bit?
Well, you need to start by getting Liberals back, people who have voted Liberal provincially in the past, people who vote federally, who right now, according to the polls at least, are not supporting the Liberal Party. So you need to attract them, you need to give them a reason to come back. You also need to point out, and if I were her, I would do this quite explicitly in this debate, that this is a historic debate for the reason it's the first debate in Ontario history where an NDP leader is going in as the frontrunner. And I think Andrea Horwath is in many ways the frontrunner right now, because of that momentum and because of where it sure feels like the race is going. And I would call out quite explicitly if I were Kathleen Wynne. Some of you are supporting Andrea Horwath because you're mad at me. I get that and I accept that. And here are the reasons why you should still consider supporting me. Party are supporting her to stop Doug Ford, and you don't need to do that anymore. You can come back to us. Doug Ford's stopping Doug Ford. I'd make that kind of an explicit appeal to try to bring back some Liberals and win some seats and hopefully get some momentum going into the last week if you're Kathleen Wynne.
Although that's a pretty surprising place to be at this stage, I guess, for the Liberals. Maybe I'll go to Brad for this. I mean, I hear people talking inside the Liberal Party about how to save the furniture. Like, how do we make sure we have 8 seats, which is official party status at Queen's Park? I mean, it's one thing to lose. It's another thing to think, oh, gosh, we just want to have, you know, enough so that we can have resources and staff. So what do you expect Andrea Horwath to do to sort of counter what Rob is talking about there?
Well, I think for Andrea Horwath, again, coming in with the momentum that everyone, I think, is universally accepting. The poll numbers are good. What we're starting to see now is that vote that she is gaining is beginning to lock in for Andrea. That is, they're no longer shopping around, that they've made the decision that they are going to be voting for Andrea. Those are all good signs. But for tonight, she has to continue to do what she's done so well on the campaign trail. That is, talk about the issues that people care about, connecting with people on what they want out of this election campaign. They want to end hallway medicine. They want more affordable prescription drugs. They want more affordable childcare. These are all the things that have gotten her to this place. So for tonight, she needs to continue to do that. She will have a target on her back. Doug Ford has 90 minutes to tell us what his platform is. He still hasn't had his platform. So she's got a lot of good ammunition against those two opponents to push back with the inevitable attacks that are going to be against her tonight.
Okay, Chad, I only have 30 seconds, but I'll start with you when we come back from the break. So in 30 seconds, what do you think Doug Ford will do?
Well, Doug Ford's done an amazing thing. He's a guy who's brand new to this. He's debating two people who have done this a couple of times already, and he's made himself the underdog as the front runner going into the end of a campaign. Andrea Horwath is going to be on trial tonight as an untested leader with an untested team, and he's going to have to demonstrate he can stand up with a team and be premier right away, and that she can't. Kathleen Wynne tonight is a corporate time waster. Every minute she's talking takes away from the real competition because voters have disqualified her from this race already.
Okay, I can see Rob has much to say just by the look on his face. But I'm going to put you on pause for a moment. I'm right back. While people take their seats in the CBC atrium, you can settle in at home too. We're going to take a short break and dissect more of what we can expect tonight and whether this could change something. Because polls matter, campaigns matter, debates tend to matter as well. Special coverage, the Ontario Leaders Debate on CBC News Network. Back after this.
Well, it's still early, so I suppose things can get quite rocky. On second thoughts, I'm gonna get some headphones. I'll be right back to join you. Well, I can probably just start. Whoops. Line. We got some ads going. But, oh, never mind.
Coverage of the Ontario Leaders Debate right here on CBC News Network. As you can see, that's the CBC Atrium. Debate beginning in about 15 minutes or so. And it will last 90 minutes, an hour and a half. Megan Fitzpatrick, though, is just outside the CBC Broadcast Centre, where crowds have started to form. And they're going to start yelling, I'm guessing, as soon as she begins to talk. Tell us who's out there, Megan, and why they're out there.
It was a very boisterous crowd a bit earlier, too, Rosie, as all the leaders were making their way
because
into
the Green
building.
Party's a small party. What do you expect?
Obviously, signs on full display. I had a chance to talk to some of the party supporters earlier, and what some of the Liberals were telling me was that rises to the challenge. They know her as a tough campaigner and a good debater, so they were expressing a lot of still optimism and faith in their leader and confidence. So they have not given up hope, they were telling me, that she can still win this thing.
I have no
One
hope
Liberal
in her.
supporter told me, really, the pressure is on Andrea Horwath tonight, given her rise in the polls and that some of those polls are showing her neck and neck with PC party leader Doug Ford, that she will be the target tonight. They know that, but they're also telling me that they think she can handle it. They like how she's performed in the first two debates, and they're expecting her to perform well again tonight, get her message across, get her platform across. Same thing with the Ford supporters. They were here earlier excited and saying that they feel good about their platform, the promises that Doug Ford is making, and that they want
they
Doug
had
Ford to defeat Doug
actors
Ford.
playing
And of course, we've got Green
supporters.
Party supporters here
From
as
what
well
I
who are
heard.
expressing their displeasure with the fact that their leader, Mike Schreiner, is not participating in the debate. The organizers only invited party leaders whose parties have seats in the Ontario legislature. So they're here expressing their displeasure. Mike Schreiner will be participating in the debate in an online forum, answering the questions alongside the other leaders on Twitter. I just want to mention quickly, there's also about a dozen or so women dressed up as the characters from Handmaid's Tale who are targeting Doug Ford, saying that he would not respect a woman's right to choose. So quite a mix of people out here, but of course, party loyalists and supporters from all of the parties here, excited to get this debate underway.
Okay, well, just all those people made me more excited than I was. Thank you, Megan. Appreciate it. We'll check back with you a bit later. All right, let's get back to our panel here and see where we're at. Eric Grenier, Megan talked about one, I guess, very optimistic Liberal supporter who thought Kathleen Wynne could still win this election. Of course, everything is possible, but is there actually a path to victory for her, given the way the polls have been tracking over the past number of weeks and months?
Well, it would be a big challenge for the Liberals, to say the least, to be able to overcome. Well, they'd have to make up about 2 points a day for the next 10 days, which would be a challenging thing to do. But we've seen lots of polling that shows that the Liberals have the least amount of voters that are accessible that would even consider voting for the party. And when you're seeing some polls showing that the amount of people who say they want to change the government being as high as 84%, that doesn't leave a lot of room for the Liberals. So it will be a challenge for them. So I think instead what the end of this campaign is about for them is to make sure that they have a respectable showing, that they can maybe force a minority government where they might have more of an influence. So for them, I think that this campaign becomes less of a province-wide campaign and more of a much more regionally focused one where they can try to get some of their more popular local MPPs re-elected rather than trying to get the government re-elected at this stage.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about Doug Ford, and everybody can have a go at this. I mean, I wondered this on At Issue last week. I continue to wonder it, whether or not Doug Ford has been almost too tightly boxed in. You know, I think there was a lot of concern, and correct me if I'm wrong, that he would go out there and say things and you know, sort of be all over the place. I'm not sure that's happened, but I wonder if that hasn't happened to his detriment in some ways, because I don't think anyone would say that this has been the most fantastic campaign for them. Chad, why don't you start?
Well, look, Doug Ford is the outsider in this race. He's the guy 90 days ago who wasn't a politician in Ontario and through a bizarre set of circumstances became not only a front-runner to be premier, he had to learn how to be a party leader and how to run a provincial campaign with everyone watching him. He has tried to look like a premier as a front-runner. He's tried to tell people, look, I'm an entertaining outsider guy who sees things differently and is willing to take on the establishment, but I'm also willing to button down and prove that I can come to a podium and represent the province appropriately. So I think he's had two challenges. The real dimension for the Conservative strategists is that an atypical, a once-in-a-century Liberal collapse has changed the entire race. A two-party race between the Conservatives and the NDP is new for Ontario. It's going to cause upsets in seats that no one predicted at the start of this race. So he's had to stand there and say, look, I've recruited candidates. I have senior people like Caroline Mulroney and Rod Phillips and others ready to form a cabinet, versus Andrea Horwath, who has a plan full of mistakes, candidates with goofy stuff that she won't renounce, who's not ready, who wins by default simply by being a little more likable as the Liberal vote, the floor comes out of the Liberal vote and cedes to the NDP unchallenged. So tonight, it's not Doug Ford on trial as it was the previous debate, it's Andrea Horwath.
What you don't know at home is that Brad and Chad are actually sitting at the same desk. And so if you at one point see one person lunge over the box, that's what's happened. They're seated
just
very close
outside
to
of reach.
We really like each other. Though, so
I know you do. I noticed that Chad, though, Brad failed to mention that over the weekend, Doug Ford decided that he would offer a $1 beer to Ontarians.
It's a great idea.
Maybe. It seemed like there's some public health issues there, but okay, go ahead, Brad.
But the biggest problem with Chad's point is that Doug Ford has not behaved like somebody who's running for premier. We have under 2 weeks to go, and he still hasn't released a platform. He has promised to cut $6 billion from the provincial budget, and he has not told Ontarians what he's going to be cutting. That is thousands of nurses, thousands of teachers, hundreds of hospitals, hundreds of schools. Which are they? He's got 90 minutes tonight. Basically, it's his last chance tonight, is to tell Ontarians what precisely he's going to be cutting, because we have the right to know. To say nothing of the fact that he's not shown leadership on the 407 identity theft scandal. He has not shown leadership when it comes to questionable candidates like Andrew Lawton in London, Ontario. These are some big mistakes that Mr. Ford has made, and without a platform, you can't say I'm applying for the job of premier, but I don't have a resume. I didn't do any of my homework. But just trust me, I'm not Kathleen Wynne. That is not responsible. In fact, what's interesting about Andrea Horwath, she's not only drawing those disappointed Liberals, she's also drawing from traditional progressive Conservatives. Mr. Ford's numbers have come down dramatically, and Ms. Horwath is picking those up because she's talking about the issues that people care about, and she has a plan. Mr. Ford doesn't.
Okay, I will want to fact check that with Eric in a minute, but I'll let Rob weigh in on Doug Ford and how he's handled the campaign so far and what tonight's debate might mean for him.
I enjoy Chad's description of Doug Ford as if he's an unfrozen caveman politician who just emerged from a deep freeze 3 months ago to decide to run for office. First off, he'd been running for mayor of Toronto, he said, for the last 3 years, and he's I don't know how that's an argument in favor of Doug Ford, that he's the outsider who just emerged and he doesn't know about your political platforms or political communications. They have run a kind of disastrous campaign. It's been in large part because of the Liberal War Room. Brad's colleague Bob Lipinski, who's running the Liberal War Room, has consistently knocked Doug Ford off message, and part of the there was it was a target-rich environment, the Conservative campaign, the Conservative leader, the Conservative set of candidates. Part two, they didn't have a very strong message. They didn't have a very consistent message other than change folks, change folks, change folks, taxes are bad. So because they didn't have a lot of substance to pivot back to, they've allowed themselves to get knocked off message to the NDP's benefit. There is an argument that the Liberal War Room has put Andrea Horwath in a lot of ways exactly where she is right now because of the damage that they've done to Doug Ford. So no, he's not a great candidate, and the problem is he may be quickly getting to a point where his ceiling of vote is well below 40%, and if the Liberal vote goes down, that's tricky to win.
Okay, I'm going to take a break, and then we're going to come back and fact check two of those things: whether Andrea Horwath can actually take progressive Conservative supporters, because that seems odd to me, and then what the floor ceiling is here for people. So Eric, I'll come back to you after this short break. One last one before the debate begins: special coverage of the Ontario Leaders Debate right here on CBC News Network.
Well, that's a whole lot of Liberal talk, and did I really care? No. They are talking like trying to go all perspectives, but I don't really see it. Well, let's see. Kathleen Wynne is still going low. The Liberals are according to them, in a hard place. The NDP may have taken the lead, but that's only just been since the last few days, maybe in a week or so at the least. According to CBC's poll tracker, the Liberals are at 21%, PCs 35.9%, and the NDP 36%. There's still 77.4% chance of the PCs winning the majority. 8% chance, 8.4 more like, percent chance that they will have the most seats, but not a majority. And then we also got the NDP with a 12.9% chance of winning the most seats. This debate is going to be a real heck of a thing, especially because this will influence how everyone in Ontario votes for this year's election. Well. I'm just really at the point where I'm like, it's hard to say because the Liberals have had the main government in Ontario. They've been running that for 15 years. The NDP have only run one term successfully with a majority, but that was back in 1990. Also known as good old Bob Rae. A similar situation as this year. Unpopular premier for the Liberals, new PC leader. It's really going to be interesting. What I can really say is that competency is going to be quite a question, I guess. It's hard to say. PCs originally had a big lead, but some scandals have dropped their lead down. Yeah, do it in a second.
There we are at the CBC Atrium in Toronto, waiting for the third and final leaders debate, just days now before the Ontario election. And it's going to be an interesting one, and it could change people's minds. Eric, let's just tackle a couple things that the gentleman said before the break, and we only have a very short period of time. But is there a path here for the NDP to steal support from the Progressive Conservatives? What is the floor or ceiling for Doug Ford? Is there one? And where else could Kathleen Wynne, I guess, pick up some support in this last week or so?
Well, the New Democrats have been picking up some support from the PCs, whether they are people who are traditionally PC or were just parking their vote with the PCs looking for a change of government. That's harder to say. But they are starting to get some from the PCs, which was not the case at the beginning of the campaign, that the most of the NDP gains were coming at the expense of the Liberals. Now, for the Conservatives, what would their floor be? Well, you'd probably look at the performances of Tim Hudak over the last two elections, so 31, 35%, something like that. We're starting to see some polls showing that the PCs could be that low. And for the Liberals, if they can make the case that the New Democrats aren't ready for government, then maybe they might be able to get some of the voters that they lost, but they might also be able to get some of the people who have voted for the Liberals in recent campaigns and are now saying they would vote for the PCs. That might be one place where they could still get a little bit of more support as this campaign reaches its final days.
Rob, is there anything that a leader can do in the face of a desire for change? Is it possible to pull it back, or is that just overwhelmingly difficult to fight against?
It's tough, especially when you've been in power for 15 years. Look, the voters are never wrong. What you need to be able to do is show that you as a government, you as a political party, are also change, that you're an activist government, that you're not a tired government. I think that's what the Liberals at Queen's Park have tried to do. They have been an extraordinarily activist government. Whether it's enough to convince voters that they represent change or that it's not time for change is a bit of rolling a boulder uphill. I'm not going to lie to you about that, Rosie. Why would I come out on TV and lie to you right now?
Yeah, that's well, good. I appreciate that. There's a hard road ahead.
No,
and I think
that's
they
funny.
understand
That's
that. Chad,
funny.
but there is, to your point, I think challenges, though, for Doug Ford, too. There are questions around problems with
here come
votes
the candidates.
and showing that he is
Glenn
capable
first,
of being a premier, which is different than what
Ford
he's
in
been
the middle,
lately. We may have
Horvath
to
on
end
the
here in
right.
30 seconds, so 10 seconds to you, Chad.
Doug Ford's got to show tonight that he's got a real plan. His voters are the most enthusiastic of any of the three parties, and he's got to get them to the polls on June 7th, show real value for how gas prices and taxes and other meaningful things are going to benefit folks if he's elected.
Well, that's what someone, and I'll give you 10 seconds too, Brad. Someone suggested to me that the voter machinery around the NDP may not be as strong as the Conservatives in terms of getting out the vote. Is there any truth to that from your perspective?
No, I wouldn't concern myself with that.
left,
If these trend lines continue that you were just showing on the graph, what the riding polls that are in the public domain are showing us right now is that the Liberals are losing almost everywhere in this province. We're debating over traditional seats. Those will go NDP.
I got to let you go. Sorry, Brad, Chad, Rob, and Eric will be back after the debate. The debate lasts 90 minutes until 8 p.m. No commercial breaks. We'll be back on the other side of it with more special coverage. You're watching CBC News Network.
All right, 6:30 to 8. And this is going to be fun.
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Paikin, and welcome to the 2018 Ontario Election Leaders Debate.
Good evening. I'm Farah Nasser. Steve and I will be your moderators today. And we should tell you that all the parties have agreed to the format, they've all agreed to the rules, and the speaking order has been decided by a draw.
And with that, let's introduce the leaders to you. They are Kathleen Wynne, the leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, the Progressive Conservative Party leader, Doug Ford, and the New Democratic Party leader, Andrea Horwath.
We are going to begin tonight with opening statements. Doug Ford, please start us off.
Well, thank you very much for having us. My friends, you know me. I'm for the little guy. I'm for the people. I'm here to tell you the PC plan, a plan to clean up the hydro mess and reduce your hydro rates by 12%, a plan to put money back into your pocket instead of the government's pocket by reducing your income tax by 20%, making sure that we reduce gasoline tax by 10 cents a liter. My plan is to create great paying jobs and nobody will be laid off. Our plan is to reduce and get rid of hallway health care. My plan is to bring honesty, integrity, and transparency back to the government. You don't have to choose between bad when it comes to the Liberals or 10 times worse when it comes to the NDP.
Absolutely,
Our
how I
government
phrased it.
is for the people, and a new day will dawn in Ontario, a day of opportunity, prosperity,
Thank you,
and
Mr.
growth
Ford.
like
That is
this
your
province
time.
has never
I will
seen.
turn it over to Ms. Horwath next.
For the people, by the people. Might as well call him the eagle and slap them all.
There's something special happening in Ontario, and everywhere I go, I can feel it. People are saying that things are going to change and that they want to see something different for the future. People are saying that they don't want to see the same old solutions from government. They know that we can have change that makes people's lives better. We don't have to accept what's been happening. We don't have to go from bad to worse. We can end hallway medicine in our province. We can make sure that every child has the education that they need. We can do so much better, and we can do that together. You know what? It doesn't have to be the way it is in this province. And I know that together we can make change that makes people's lives better. I'm confident that we can do that together on June 7th. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Horwath.
Nope.
Once again, audience,
No
I'd
chance
ask
for you.
that you restrain your reactions. We're trying to get this moving and for people to get the most out of this debate. So I will ask you, please, to refrain from your applause. Ms. Wynne, you're next.
Thank you very much. Government isn't about winning power. It's about using the power that you're given to make a lasting difference in people's lives. And my opponents love to talk about my record, and so do I. So here's what I want to say about the last 5 years. Sorry, not sorry. I'm really genuinely sorry that more people don't like me. But I am not sorry about all of the things that we're doing in Ontario to make life better. I'm not sorry that we're covering tuition for 235,000 students. I'm not sorry that we're protecting the environment. And I'm really not sorry that we're no longer asking single moms to raise a family on $11.40 an hour. We've created nearly 1 million jobs, and we've got a plan for better hospital care, better home care, and better child care that builds on that success. I'm not sorry that we're making an economy that works for everyone, not just for a few.
Thank you, Kathleen Wynne, for the opening statement. Okay.
Kathleen Wynne, you
suck. Everybody, we let everybody get away with applause for the opening statements, but let's really focus now on the debate. We're breaking this up into 3 segments this evening, doing something a little bit different. For the first segment, which we're about to go into now, Farah and I are going to ask a few questions. These questions have been chosen by a panel of journalists, the broadcasters producing this debate, and the first question is about trust. And Doug Ford, you get the chance to answer this question first. Trust in politicians, as we all know these days, is rather low. Why should voters trust you?
Well, let me tell you, Steve, and I'm going to tell the people at home, every day I have to make decisions for a couple hundred families at our company. And every decision I make, I have to make sure it's the right decision. I have to make the right decision when we're elected on June the 7th for 14 million people. And I take that seriously. I also have a proven track record. When I say I'm going to do something, we've done it. Under the City of Toronto, we saved the taxpayers over $1.16 billion, and not one single person lost their job. And under our government, I'm going to reinforce this, not one single person will lose their job. What I say I'm going to do, we're going to do. I'm the only one with a proven track record of governing and saving the taxpayers' money and keeping promises, not breaking promises, not saying one thing and doing something else. That's what I promised the people, and I will turn this province around, and we will have this province moving like you've never seen before. We'll see economic growth. We'll see new jobs being created. The likes this province has never seen. Prosperity to the people, prosperity to companies. We're going to need more people. We're going to need to hire more nurses, more teachers when the economy is going. My friends,
okay, Mr. Ford,
we will have this economy booming.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Kathleen Wynne, you have the next opportunity to respond.
So 4 years ago, I promised the people of Ontario that I would build this province up. And that's exactly what we've been doing.
How so?
We've
Prove it.
created nearly 1 million jobs. We've built roads and bridges and transit all over this province. We've got the lowest unemployment rate in nearly 20 years.
Doesn't matter because the wage is $14 an hour.
Other parts of Canada and the United States. So what we are seeing in Ontario is prosperity that is drawing business, that is allowing businesses to expand, and at the same time, we've got 235,000 students whose tuition is being covered. We've got children whose prescription medication is being covered. So what we've done is build the province up in a way that deals with infrastructure deficits that had been left by previous governments, and at the same time, we're making our economy fairer for everyone, not just for a few people, but for everyone in this province. Everyone who needs free tuition, everyone who needs prescription medication, for families who need more home care. All of that is happening at the same time that the economy is growing. And our plan that we're putting forward would build on that. So I did what I said I was going to do, and we know that we can continue to foster economic growth in the province.
Andrea Horvath.
Thanks, Steve. You know, it's frustrating, I think, for a lot of people as they watch governments make promises that life's going to get better, only to see that after 25 years of Liberal and Conservative governments, life just keeps getting harder for families. And when people say, when politicians say, well, we're going to make it better and you can trust us, we make all these promises, it makes people cynical about politics. And one of the things that I find very, very worrisome is that's what turns people off of voting. And it makes people think that you can't have change, that no matter who gets elected, and I don't know if you folks have heard it, but I've heard it many times, no matter who gets elected, it's all going to be the same. And I think that this is an election where we can actually make change for the better, where we can say we don't have to go back to Liberal and Conservative governments. We can have a government that puts people at the heart of every decision, so that it's not about getting a bump in the polls, and it's not about slogans and bumper stickers. It's about people and families each and every time. That's what New Democrats have fought for. That's what I fought for as leader for 9 years in the legislature, proudly, and prior to that, when I was a city councillor, and as well when I was an MPP. And all I can say is this: I believe that we can make this province a place where everyone can build a good life, and I'm asking that folks have some trust in that for a change.
The rules now provide for open debate among the three of you, and Mr. Ford, you get the first comment.
Well, trust comes down to who do you trust with your money? Do you trust an NDP government that says they have a budget and then mysteriously they made a mistake of $7 billion on their own budget and their own plan? So their plan's out the window.
Mr. Ford, not true.
Their plan is actually out the window. It made a $7 billion mistake.
Well,
so the NDP can't do math.
Mistake.
Obviously.
So
and the Liberals are cooking the books.
Mr. Ford, in
There's
fact,
one person that they can trust with their money that has a proven...
Stop lying, Horvath. Stop lying.
Mr. Ford, take 10 seconds to finish your point, then we'll hear Andrew Horvath.
And then I'd like...
And then Ms. Wynne.
There's one person who has a proven record of saving the taxpayers' money. We don't make mistakes in our budget. We don't make $7 billion mistakes.
Do you have a plan?
We don't cook the books
Shut
to
up
$12 billion.
first.
Okay, let's hear Andrew
We make
Horvath's
sure
response.
we keep our promises.
Let's give Andrew a chance to respond. Andrew Horvath.
So we did admit that there was a mistake and we fixed it right
Yeah,
away.
at
It's
least
nowhere near what Mr. Ford's talking about, but there you go. Inflating of numbers when we haven't even seen any numbers from Mr. Ford. People started voting yesterday, Mr. Ford. Where is your platform? Where is your respect for the people now when they're already at the polls and you haven't provided them any information about what it is that you plan to do in our province? What are you going to cut?
Kathleen
What
Wynne's
is going to
turn.
suffer
Kathleen
from Mr.
Wynne,
Ford's
please.
cuts?
Yeah, and I think, Doug, nobody has any idea what those 10, 12, 14, we don't even know what the number is, $1 billion worth of cuts would mean to the people of this province. What we do know is that education and healthcare would be hurt. There is absolutely no way that you can take billions of dollars out of the services that are provided in this province and not hurt education and healthcare. And I'm only standing here tonight because I got involved in provincial politics because of what Mike Harris was doing in this province, cutting across government, which is exactly what, Doug, you have proposed. And I would just say to you, Andrea, that, you know, to suggest that somehow the economy is not growing in Ontario and people are not finding a life that they can be proud of is just not the case. Of course we can do better. Of course that there's more that we can do. But to suggest that there hasn't been improvement since Mike Harris was the Premier is just not the case.
But Kathleen, the question was about trust. And I was in the legislature the day that you said straight to my face that you had no intention of selling off Hydro One. And then what did you do? A couple of months later, you started selling off Hydro One. That goes straight to trust, Kathleen.
I'm going to have to stop the discussion now because we're on to our next question from journalists. And our next question, it's about affordability. And Ms. Wynne, you're going to have the first chance to respond to this question. We've heard a lot of people complain that life in Ontario isn't as affordable as they would like. What specific policy changes are you offering to address this? Once again, Ms. Wynne, you can start us off.
Thanks very much. And I think that we all know that as our economy changes, as our society changes, as our society ages, people are confronting costs that they might not have before. And we recognize that. And so this is not a matter of what are we going to do going forward. We are already putting in place supports. That's what That's what covering the cost of tuition for low and middle income families is about. That's what free prescription medication for children from their birth till their 25th birthday is about, and seniors next year.
There's no such thing as free lunch, so why are you making everything free?
That are put in place so that people can have that extra amount of money in their pocket. We know that there's a need for support for dental and support for pharma for the rest of the population. That's what our plan is about. Parents who are looking for childcare need to know that that's going to be available. You know, go to any playground at any school in Ontario and you'll meet young mums and dads who need to find childcare. So our plan is about building on the full-day kindergarten that we've already put in place and putting in place free preschool childcare. All of those things are about helping people with the affordability of their lives.
Well, you're spending taxpayer money to make everything free.
So we can't actually deliver the services that people need. And that's exactly what Doug Ford would do.
Ms. Horwath, your turn.
Thanks very much for the question. You know, it reminds me of a woman that I met just very recently in Scarborough when we were doing a childcare announcement about making sure that childcare is available at $12 a day for families. And she approached our bus. She wasn't part of our press conference. She approached our bus and waited for me to come out to say hello. She's a woman that was in her late 30s, 3 kids. And she said to me, Andrea, I did everything that I was supposed to do. She said, I went to school, I got my degree. At first, I didn't get a job in my field, but I did eventually. She said, I'm a single mom now with 3 kids, and I've done everything that I was supposed to do, but I have to go to a food bank to feed my children every week. She said, I can't pay the rent, I can't pay my hydro bill, I don't have a plan for my kids in terms of dental benefits. This is exactly what our plan is all about. It's to help folks have a more affordable life so that they can have hope for the future. No mom should have to take her kids to a food bank or feed her kids through a food bank if she's working full-time and doing the best she can. The cost of housing is too unaffordable. The cost of childcare is too unaffordable. Years and years of Liberal government, and things have gotten harder for families and not better. And that's why our plan not only deals with prescription drugs and dental and childcare, but it recognizes that these are the things that families need to build a good life here.
Mr. Ford, your response, please.
Well, you think it's unaffordable now under the Liberals, and it's bad, but it's going to get 10 times worse under the NDP. We've seen this show before. We've seen when the NDP were in power that 125,000 people lost their jobs. Unemployment skyrocketed 28%. Welfare rates went up. We had the highest taxes in North America. My friends, I'm going to reduce your personal income tax by 20%. I'm going to reduce the gas price per liter by 10 cents a liter. I'm going to reduce your hydro rates by 12%. That is true savings.
What we want.
My friends
this
here
is what
to the
we
right,
want.
the NDP and the Liberals, they believe in one thing: big government, tax, spend. The people that are most vulnerable are the low-income people that get hurt. When they put the carbon tax jacks up the gas price, the worst tax ever, jacks up the
look at how much gas
jacks up
is.
every single
At least
item you buy in the
$1.30
store, and it does
on
nothing
average.
for the
$1.20,
environment. They believe
$1.30,
in high taxes.
maybe even
I believe in
$1.40
empowering
on
the
times.
people, not empowering the government. The people can spend their money a lot wiser than the government can. That's the difference between the NDP, the Liberals, and the PCs.
Okay, Mr. Ford, thank you very much for that. Ms. Wynne, will you please begin this period of open debate?
Yeah, so, you know, Doug, if you believe that people need to have more money in their pockets, it's interesting that you don't support raising the minimum wage, because the minimum wage is making a huge difference to people across this province. And we've committed to increasing it to $15 an hour next year. You don't support that. And Andrea, you know, the child care plan, and you know, the fact is that we share a lot of the same values. But
no, duh, you're on the same ideology.
Work. That's
Only
the
the
problem with it.
NDP
Your
is
childcare
slightly
plan
more
will
left than
actually
liberals.
Your child care plan will actually create long
$2,000 a month for childcare in Toronto. That's what your plan has done. You've been in office for 15 years. The problems that families
Liberal
are facing,
majority
the
for
struggles
15
they're having,
years?
is
No
because
more.
you haven't been paying attention
No
to
more
everyday
liberals.
folks and what they
Period.
need to build a good life in our province.
kindergarten.
And I'm sorry, Mr.
Full
Ford,
day kindergarten.
$18 a year in tax breaks.
Let's let Mr. Ford have a say.
Life more affordable.
Your plan would annihilate the middle class. Your plan would bankrupt this province. You know it. You're spending.
Wrong, Mr. Ford.
It's the inflation, idiots.
Where is your money coming from?
Exactly. Where's the money coming from? That's what we want to know from you two incompetent women.
For the rich. Your plan's going to give $1,200 to the rich and $18 to everyday families.
Liar. Liar.
So, my friends, do me a favor, the people listening at home. Go to your employer on Monday.
You're not being honest,
Go to
Mr.
your
Ford.
employer on Monday and ask him one question from Doug Ford. What would happen to my job? God forbid the NDP ever got in. I know the answer. They'd be gone because 125,000 jobs are lost.
Mr. Ford, let Ms. Wynne say something, please.
1990s all over again.
What would happen to your
Anyone?
hospital under a Doug Ford government? And what would happen to every service that you depend on under a Doug Ford
Let me
government?
tell you what happened to schools under the Liberals. They closed 600 schools, more schools than any government ever in the history of Ontario.
One at a time,
That's
Mr.
what would
Ford, one at a
happen.
time, please.
Mr. Ford, you refuse to put a moratorium on closures of schools. And you know
Oh,
what?
no,
The
that's not
schools
true,
are often
Actually,
the glue
we did
that
put a
keeps
moratorium on
communities
schools.
together. And
Closing
I've been
the
to many small communities in rural Ontario and all across the province where the schools were the only thing that the community had to hold the community together, to provide a place where families and neighbors could
If you're not convinced that the NDP is
together,
terrible
taking
for
their kids to
Ontario,
school, bringing them
just
home,
ask
and other
Alberta
events that
and
took place at the
BC.
school. And with all of the school closures that have taken place in our province, it has devastated communities. So we're going to stop that because we know that people deserve to have a decent community school. We're going to turn those schools into community hubs every chance that we get because people deserve to have those assets
the fact is
in their
our
neighborhoods.
government is the first government
The
to
fact
even
is, I've
build
got to jump in
community
here.
hubs and build 800 schools. Come on, guys.
Build.
Ladies and gentlemen, time for us to
Really?
That is the end of question 2. Time now for question 3. This is the third and final question in the first segment of our debate here. The questions from us. Andrea Horvath, you'll have the chance to respond first. This question is about the character and values of our political leaders. The Ontario of 2018 is one where diversity, inclusiveness, gender equality are championed and considered by most as a good thing about living in this province.
And in this past year, we've seen a reckoning around sexual harassment and sexual assault. Each of your parties, be it federally or provincially, have had members who have been accused of misconduct in some way. What are you going to do to tackle the underlying problem of power imbalance within politics and in other professions?
That's a great question, and thank you very much for that. I have to say that one of the things that I believe is that you have to have decision makers around the decision-making tables that reflect our community to get a true balance of voices in terms of policy and decision-making. And so I'm proud to say that our team of candidates is 56% women. We have people from every ethno-cultural and religious background. We have young people. We have people from the LGBTQ community. So our group of potential MPPs will have a number of different lived experiences to bring to our table. One of the things that we have done, because we take this very, very seriously, is we've done some training already at the political level. So within our caucus, within our staff, within our constituency staff, we've been doing anti-racism and anti-sexism training. We've been trying to work with the unions that represent our workers to improve the
Yeah, but you don't want to use
agreements,
back-to-work
because
legislation,
nobody
you
should go to
coward.
work and be in a situation where they're feeling like they are vulnerable to racist or sexist attacks, or not feel that they can get ahead or promoted because of their gender or any other personal situation or background or faith that they have. So we've already started that journey, but it's one that we will never rest with. We'll continue to improve.
Thank you, Ms. Horvath. Doug Ford, your turn.
Well, we have the most diverse group of candidates I've ever seen in the PC party. From every race, from every culture, from every background. My friends, we have the best candidates I've ever seen ever in a party. We're ready to govern. We're ready to go out. We're ready to form government. Unlike the NDP, they have radical activists as candidates, absolutely radical activists that get their inspiration from Adolf Hitler.
Not true,
They get their
Mr.
got
Ford,
it right
that's
there.
not
Inspiration
true.
He needs to
from
be allowed.
Adolf Hitler.
Shame on you.
Inspiration calling our veterans war. You know, they were actually one of your candidates came out and called our veterans war criminals. Another activist, political activist, believes in shutting down mines and making sure they celebrate when mines and forestry are closed. See, that's the radical activists that the NDP have surrounded themselves with. And as for using your power, that is unacceptable when anyone tries to use their power
calling the free
for
speech
any
card
indiscretions. We will have zero tolerance when it comes to that. I can tell you.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. That's time. We can pick it up during the debate segment. Kathleen Wynne.
Thanks so much.
What the hell are you
my
trying to
whole
say?
life, I'm the eldest of 4 girls, and my whole life I have been very aware of the power imbalances in our society, whether at school,
So
whether
you
in
say, but you're
our community
incompetent as hell.
at large, and it is really, really fundamental to me that we tackle these issues. I don't think it has anything to do with diversity. I think it has to do with human interaction, whoever we are. And so I have worked as the leader to make sure that we have rules in place, to make sure all of our staff at Queen's Park have been trained, all of our MPPs have been trained. We have a strict vetting process for candidates, but we've gone beyond that. I had a woman come up to me in Guelph the other night, and she works in the violence against women sector, and she said, for 30 years, she's worked in this sector, and there's never been a government that has been more supportive of that sector, has put more resources in place. So this is about our individual character, and it is about what we do in our caucus. I've had situations to deal with, and I've dealt with in my caucus. We have processes, but it's also about how we play a leadership role in the broader society and model those behaviors and make sure that we put those resources in place. It goes to what I said at the beginning. It's about how we use the power that we're given to make a lasting influence, make a lasting impact on people's lives.
Okay, Ms. Wynne, that's time. Thank you. Ms. Horvath, will you please get us started for open debate?
Thanks very much. I want to say straight up that any memes that had anything to do with Hitler is absolutely abhorrent, and it's something that I absolutely reject completely. But
Well,
Mr.
one
Ford's
of the provincial
tabloid
candidates under your party
mudslinging
posted
against my
that.
candidates only foments divisiveness and hatred, and it has to stop. It's the wrong thing to do. Mr. Ford, you of all people, you have police investigations into by 3 different police forces into candidates, not from things that were dug up 10 years ago on Facebook, but right now from data that was stolen from 407 records. Mr. Ford,
Is that even relevant?
Your candidates and your party.
But the difference
Again to the audience.
Is that
You live in a glass
the difference between myself
blah,
and
blah,
the NDP,
blah.
I acted decisively, immediately. When your candidate, the radical activist, came out and criticized our veterans and said that Poppy should be landfill and that they're war criminals, are men and women that are fighting for the country, your comment was very simply free speech. You didn't act decisively.
Yeah, you're pulling a free
But
speech
again,
card.
when you
So
were
how's
asked about
that
the depth of your team,
helpful?
I love your comment. I'll send them to training school. I'll tell you, this is not time for training school to form a government.
Again,
audience, that's ready.
I please ask the audience to calm down.
Mr. Ford, if you had more of a sense of humor and less of a sense of...
I think that and you know, we're in an election, so this is a partisan time. I get that. But in between elections, we're just people in Ontario trying to find our way and trying to work together. And I think that we have to acknowledge that there are situations that every one of us has to deal with in our lives and as leaders that take action and honesty and transparency. That's the value system that each of us has to bring to this job, because every single one of us has had to deal with situations, and we need to be open, we need to be honest, and we need to tell the people of the province how we are dealing with those situations. This isn't a situation that is specific to one party. This is about our society, and we've got to work together to make sure that we find a way to deal with these problems that have literally been around for decades. We've got to find a way to deal with them, but we can't do it by slinging mud at each other and being dishonest. We have to tell the truth to each other.
And I do...
You say you're telling the truth, but you're incompetent as hell,
You absolutely encapsulated the issue, Kathleen, and I appreciate that, because it's true. There's no doubt that people come from different lived experiences. They have different opinions, but what I can say about the candidates on my team is that every single one of them wants to end hallway medicine. They want life to get better for Ontarians, and they're focused on our platform.
Yeah,
Thank you very
how?
much for that,
By
Ms.
raising
Horvath. Our next
debt.
segment could get very interesting. It's a chance for each of the leaders to ask one of the other leaders a question. I'm going to start with you, Ms. Wynne. What is your question, and who is it for?
So my question is to the leader of the NDP. Andrea, you've promised never to use back-to-work legislation with the public sector union. And I just want to know if you've really thought that through, because what it means is that unions would know that there is no way that you can ever say no. They can go on strike until they get absolutely everything that they've asked for. And this isn't an abstract issue. The NDP blocked legislation that would have returned York students to class weeks ago. Difficult negotiations are going on right now with nuclear power workers. So you would put Ontario permanently on strike, or you'd empty the public purse to pay off huge union demands. So why would you put public sector unions first and the people of this province second?
Well, I want to say how disappointing I am to hear this from you. I expected a question like that from Mr. Ford, quite frankly, Ms. Wynne.
You are a
but
joke.
Nonetheless, what I believe is that we have to prevent those kinds of labor disputes from happening in the first place. And when you have a government that cuts public education, that gives tax cuts to corporations instead of funding our healthcare system, that makes it more difficult for professors and staff and teaching assistants and others in universities and colleges to do a good job because their employer, the Government of Ontario, has created precarious work in their workplace, then you're going to end up in labor disputes. I mean, we have young people in our province who are graduating from college and university with a mountain of debt on their shoulders and no real opportunities to be able to build a good life. And the sad thing about that is that although the Liberals talk a good game about precarious work, and they brought in Bill 148 after much urging by the NDP to deal with precarious work, as an employer, they are basically encouraging precarious work in our colleges and universities. So one of the things that I have done is committed to taking the freeze off of the university and college funding and to do what other provinces, frankly, are doing, which is recognizing that in this day and age with this uncertain economy, we need more people to be able to access college and university, but we also have to make sure that we're funding those institutions to improve the quality of education and the quality of work that they provide. And so it's not as simple as giving away all of the dollars to the workers. What it is about making sure that we're preventing those kinds of labor disputes in the first place, because we're respecting the workers that work for all of us, and we're making sure that we're funding our public institutions properly.
Thank you, Ms. Horvath, for the answer to that question. Now, Mr. Ford, you're going to have a chance, an uninterrupted chance to respond and weigh in on the discussion, and then we're going to have an open debate. Go ahead, please.
You want me to ask the question?
You can respond to the discussion, to the same issue that we're talking about here.
Well,
It's the debate part.
I understand.
Friends, it's actually not the debate part. No, you can respond, have a statement.
Oh, it's his response.
I get it. I get it, ladies. Well, again, my friends, I look at this as who is going to stand up for the people. It's very simple. Who is going to have the best interest of the people at heart? Is it going to be the NDP? Or is it going to be the Liberals? Or is it going to be the PCs? And I think it's very clear who has the best interest of our economy, of our people at heart. We have a proven record at making sure that we save the taxpayers' money. We have a proven record that we're going to put money back into the taxpayers' pocket instead of the government's. I believe in empowering the people. I don't believe in empowering the government. I don't believe everything should be government run. I believe in respecting the people. That's what I believe in. The people can make decisions, not the government.
How's this relevant? We are going to start open debate, and Ms. Wynne, yes,
so
you get us started.
The question, and Andrew, I heard all of your, I heard your issue about the funding, but here was the question was, and I believe in collective bargaining. I think the collective bargaining process is a really important part of our democracy.
What happened with Bill 115 then, Kathleen?
Yeah, Bill 115, you idiots.
Respect the collective bargaining process. That's not the evidence. That's not how you've behaved, though.
Bill 115 was the worst bill ever invented, you incompetent woman.
Stomped on the collective bargaining process, and you ended up at the Supreme Court of Canada for that.
I know that you are beholden. You're beholden to the unions on this. I get that.
Kathleen, wow.
I get that. But here's the issue. I believe in collective bargaining. I believe in it, but at a certain point, when all of the
you believe in it until you don't anymore.
No, I believe in it.
Oh, you're a joke. The two of you are a joke.
And if you take away the one tool that government has,
it's not a government tool, Kathleen.
It
is not a government tool.
Eternal strikes.
That's how you continue
or an empty public purse.
Okay,
that's the question.
Let's just be clear, though. Let's just be clear. It is not a government tool. What it is the removal of constitutional rights. Look,
not after you go through the process,
you know what?
You're wrong.
Can I just finish? I think that it's pretty clear that nobody likes strikes. It's not good for workers. It's not good for employers.
Yeah, I've been a damn pawn chip for 5 weeks last year.
For families, particularly who are relying on government services when there is a strike. And that's why it's important to do everything you can to make sure that those strikes don't happen. But make no mistake.
Yeah, how are you going to do that if you're not going to allow back to work legislation to happen?
Saying we're just going to take away people's constitutional rights because we have the power to do so.
I'm going to actually stop you all there. We haven't heard from Mr. Ford in a little bit, so I want to let him weigh in on this topic.
I kind of let him go at it for every once in a while there.
Anyways, you don't believe in unions, actually.
I do believe in fair collective bargaining. But the NDP, there's a point that you have to stop it.
Exactly.
That's in jeopardy.
This is what we need. This is what we need. There has to be a point where
you look at some of these college strikes, university strikes,
you're
jeopardizing the students.
I've been apart for 5 weeks last year.
26,000 students lost their job because they didn't go back to work. You can sit there, and again, I believe in fair collective bargaining. I don't believe in putting the public in jeopardy, and that's what you're doing. You're putting the people.
Mr. Ford,
exactly.
How many students are going to be in jeopardy when you start cutting universities and colleges?
You're kind of on shaky territory.
How much is that going to hurt?
The unions say jump, you say how high.
Students?
That's the difference.
The point that I want to make is that if there is no tool at the end of a collective bargaining process when there is no way to resolve an issue, how does government act in the public interest if that tool is removed? And we can go through long collective bargaining processes, and if there's an impasse, there has to be some tool there.
Forgive me for jumping in. That's our time for that one. We are now on to the next question. This is a leader-to-leader question. Andrea Horvath, you get to ask the question. What is it, and to whom?
Thank you. My question is to Mr. Ford.
I didn't expect anything different.
Well, that's good. You're catching on. Mr. Ford, here we are. The polls opened yesterday, and you haven't told people what your $6 billion in cuts is going to look like. Now, you say that you respect the voters, that you respect Ontarians. You started, the people started going to the polls yesterday. They're in the at the polls today. They haven't got any idea of what your cuts are going to look like. What kind of cuts are going to happen in hospitals? How many nurses are going to be laid off? How many teachers are going to be laid off? How many public services are going to be cut to the bone? How many more people are going to be in hallways with your $6 billion of cuts? Why don't you think it's important, to be honest, and show people a platform?
That's the time for the question. Doug Ford, the answer, please.
Well, it's been pretty clear. Every single day I've been putting out announcements, and our announcements actually put a dollar figure beside it. And our announcements is about putting more money into people's pocket. We're going to reduce the hydro rates, which is the #1 issue right across this province with people and with companies. We're going to reduce that 12%. We're going to make sure that we reduce the cost of gas by 10 cents a liter. That is absolutely huge to every single person. I know that you think that driving, the NDP thinks driving's a luxury, but actually it's essential to day in and day out lives. My friends,
You're wrong, Mr. Ford. I don't think
we're going to make sure we reduce taxes. We're going to be the only government that actually reduces taxes by 20%. We've had a plan, and we're rolling it out every single day with costing. The difference is you made a $7 billion mistake on your own
You're not
plan.
being honest, Mr. Ford.
$1.5 billion a year times 5 years.
It's not true, Mr. Ford.
You're right up by $7 billion. That's the difference between having a plan and having no plan whatsoever, promising 30, 40, 50 billion dollars. I still don't know where you're getting all your money from. 40, 50
exactly.
$billion.
How is the NDP going to balance their budget?
Get it from my friends at home? They're getting it from you.
No.
They're getting it from the taxpayers.
Wrong,
that who's going to be paying the bill are the people. But I can tell you, tell you one thing. When our government comes into power, a new day will dawn, a day of prosperity, a day of opportunity, and a day of growth the likes this province has never seen before. We will blaze a new trail for each and every single person in this great province and give them opportunity and put money back into their pocket instead of the government's pocket. That's our plan.
Okay, audience, thank you. Thank you, audience. Audience, please, let's keep the applause to a dull roar, please. Kathleen Wynne, you have an opportunity to respond.
Thank you. Mr. Ford, you know, I think if you had a plan, you would share it with the people of Ontario. I think you would tell people exactly what you were going to do, and you would tell them what you were going to cut, and you were going to tell them why you were going to cut it, and you would tell them why that would be good for them. But I can tell you that, as I said, I'm standing here because I lived through what Mike Harris did to this province. And we have to remember that when you don't support or believe in public services, when you believe that it's okay to fire nurses, it's okay to take teachers out of schools, and you cut those services, then that hurts people. It hurts kids. You know, we were talking about strikes and unions. My kids were in school during the Harris years, and they were out of school more than they were in school some years because there was so much labor unrest. There was so little cooperation between the provincial government and our public services. So, Mr. Ford, it would be great if you would share with the people of Ontario exactly what you're going to do. 3 minutes of open
debate now. Actually, Andrea Horwath, rules say you get the first kick at this.
Thanks, and I guess it's kind of shocking to me that Mr. Ford, that you believe that announcements with a dollar figure beside them equals a platform and equals a costed platform. That's not how it works, Mr. Ford. And the people of Ontario deserve so much better than that. They deserve to know if you're going to be firing 20,000 nurses, if you're going to be shutting 780 hospitals. What exactly does it look like to have a Ford government in Ontario? And you're not being honest with people about that. And I think that's what folks deserve at the very least.
True leadership.
True leadership is being honest with people about what
audience, please. Audience.
That's true leadership.
True leadership is not being dishonest. The NDP have been dishonest. Matter of fact, the last time the NDP were in office, 125,000 people lost their jobs. The economy was a disaster. You closed 10,000 hospital beds under the NDP. Do you know why they closed it? Because the economy started to tank. It was a disaster. Companies were leaving right, left, and center.
Going around in circles, I swear.
Kathleen Wynne, please.
So here's the thing about having a plan, and whether, whichever one of us brings a plan forward, it has to be transparent, people have to understand it, and it has to be doable. Mr. Ford, we have no idea what your plan is. We have no idea what those cuts will be about. And Andrea, there's so many holes and gaps in your plan that it's not practical. So you need, it's hard to find the fairest way forward in the province. Leadership is about finding the fairest way forward for the largest number of people. That's hard work. It takes a lot of explanation and a lot of hard work to make sure you put the policies in place that are actually going to help people.
It's not fair to have people lined up in hallways in stretchers. And it's not fair to leave people over the age of 25 and under the age of 65 without prescription drug coverage. And it's not fair to have young moms with infants and toddlers who want to get back to work to bring their family income back.
Response from Ms. Wynne and then Mr. Ford. A response and then a response.
That's not fair. That's what's not fair. It's also not fair to cover only 110 drugs when there are 4,400 on the formulary, which we're covering. And it's also not fair if you're going to put childcare in place that it doesn't work.
Okay, if I may, leaders, leaders, Doug Ford, please.
The only party that's going to be able to afford more people is the PC party. We're going to have the economy booming. We're going to need more teachers.
Come on.
We're going to need more nurses. We're going to need more doctors.
Show us the plan.
We're going to make sure that we have the economy booming because we have seen it. We have seen in the past. We have seen in the past. We lost 300,000 jobs under the Liberals.
We created nearly 1 million.
Liar. I don't believe you.
My friends, go talk
That
to your
is time. We are moving on. Mr. Ford.
Mr.
Ford, the final question is yours. Who is it for?
Well, it would be to my friend heading up the NDP. Andrea, how will you prevent your NDP government from causing another recession like the last NDP government caused? And it was a disaster.
Well, Mr. Ford, unfortunately, I think you've got your facts wrong. The NDP was brought to power at a time when the economy was already failing. But that's because people were afraid of what a Ford or what a Conservative government might do. And what I want to say is this. We are in 2018 now. This is not this is not 1990, and I am certainly not Bob Rae. In fact, he's a Liberal now. That's a whole other story. I don't want to get into it. But what I believe is that, in fact, the deficit that we have, the problems that we have in Ontario, the biggest economic challenge that we have.
Yeah, but your deficits are going to be much higher.
Everyday people, like the young woman I was talking about that I met in Scarborough. You know, there's been 25 years of Conservative and Liberal governments, and people still feel like they're struggling to get ahead. And that's why our plan says, yes, we will run a little bit of a deficit for the first couple of years, and we'll go back down to balance. But in the meantime, we've got to fix what Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals broke. We've got to make sure that families can get the prescription drugs they need, they can get the dental care that they need, that they can afford childcare. I mean, childcare is $2,000 a month for some families in Toronto. The Board of Trade says that 42% of young people are leaving Toronto because they can't afford to live here. That has to change. And so that's why our plan is all about making sure that the family budget is able to be kosher, that the family budget can be afforded, that people can build a good life here once again. And yes, Mr. Ford, we are going to ask the richest corporations and the richest people to chip in a little bit more to help us make sure that this prosperous province is a place where everybody has a chance to build a good life, because that's the very least that we can expect in a place like Ontario.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
Really?
Ms. Horvath, Ms. Wynne, your turn to respond.
Yeah, and Andrea, the vision is a very good one. But the reality is that in Ontario today, we are seeing economic growth that is better than other jurisdictions in Canada. It's better than the United States. And we've balanced the budget, and that allows us to make the investments that we are making. It allows us to put more childcare in place. You know, we created full-day kindergarten. Kids from the age of 4 have full-day kindergarten. We did that. We brought that in. We're building 100,000 childcare spaces, but we know there's more to be done. I understand that there's more to be done. Families need more support, but you can't do that by having uncompetitive businesses. You need businesses to be able to compete.
Then why did you do what you did to hydro?
Sorry, Ms. Horvath, I apologize.
Because, you know, raising the property taxes on business by an average of 28% is not going to make us more competitive. I've spent a lot of time in the United States fighting for businesses in a very uncertain economy, global economy, in the NAFTA situation.
And that's your time, Ms. Wynne. That is your time. Thank you
is
very much. It's time for another open debate. And Mr. Ford, you can kick us off.
Let's be real here with the NDP. You're saying you're going to go after the largest companies. You'll spend $50 billion. There won't be any large companies to go after because they're all going south of the border. Let's be realistic here. And all these so-called rich people, and I'd like to know who all the so-called rich people
You're
are.
giving them $1,200 a year. You should know them.
I'll tell you one thing. There's a lot
Are
more
they being real?
$1,200
Did he?
NDP,
Did he?
Cuts, Mr. Ford. That's what
the
you favor.
NDP
Did he?
will annihilate, my friends, the middle class. We've seen it before.
Mr.
You know
Ford,
something?
Mr.
I wouldn't
Ford,
even
you're not being honest, Mr. Ford. I don't think you've even read my plan.
I wouldn't even say that
You have not read my
about
plan.
the Liberals.
Andrea Horvath, you're more dishonest
Okay,
than Wynne.
My plan actually protects middle class and low income families. And what it does is say that the richest amongst it doesn't raise it on small businesses. It doesn't raise taxes on low-income families, on middle-class families, but on the richest Ontarians, like yourself, it does.
Goodness.
And what your plan does is give $18 to people earning under $49,000 a year. So you say you're for the people, Mr. Ford, but people in Ontario can't afford this.
We're gonna let Ms. Wynne have a say now. Go ahead, Ms. Wynne.
What we have had to do to get to the place where Ontario's economy is doing as well as it has, creating nearly a million jobs, what we've had to do is find a balance.
You say you've created 1 million jobs, but you're reducing the incentive to hire entry-level people.
To a particular group, but finding the practical solutions to the problems that confront us as a society. We have technological change. We have climate change. We have an aging population. Those are all challenges that have to be part of the solution. We have to tackle those, and we have. Is there more to do? Absolutely. But we have been able to find a balance working with business, working with labor to have a thriving economy.
As you cut corporate tax rates in Ontario, people started lining up in our hospitals on stretchers. You know, you should not have, an 80-year-old man or 78-year-old man in a hospital washroom with his pillow by a toilet in the province of Ontario. And your cuts have done that, Ms. Wynne, as you've cut the corporate tax rate. When I talk to businesses, you know what they tell me? They tell me that they want to see a workforce that's well educated.
Andrew,
they want to see transportation systems that work for them. They want to see electricity rates that are competitive in the province of Ontario.
And that's exactly what they have. They have the highly skilled workforce. They have they are competitive because of the society that we've built, but we are not going to continue to cut taxes the way Doug Ford is talking about.
Leaders, that is our time for this segment. We have had the journalist questions for part 1. We have had leader asking leader question for part 2. We're now into part 3, which is questions from the public. We have invited members of the public to send us their questions. We got hundreds of them. We picked 6 for the debate tonight, and so we're going to go into our audience here at the CBC in the atrium, downtown Toronto, for the first question, and Andrea Horvath, you will get the first chance to answer. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you for all the candidates for listening to my questions, and thank you for the media for choosing me. My name is Martin Badger. I'm 19 years old, and I'm a first-time voter from Burlington. My question is for all 3 candidates. How do you plan to pay for all the additional services that you're promising in your plans?
That's what I want to know.
Thanks very much, Martin, and I really appreciate the question, and I I know that there are people across our province who are very concerned about the accumulated debt, and that's something that I'm concerned about as well. But as I said earlier, I'm also concerned about the family debt and the inability of families to make ends meet in a province that's really quite prosperous. And
Yeah, I
after
like
a
that
couple
you're
of
concerned,
decades of
but you're
my
going to rack
colleagues
the debt
being
up
at the
even
helm,
more.
we see families having a harder time. And so what our plan does is it protects everyday families, it protects middle-class families, low-income families, it protects small business, but what it does do, as we strive to get rid of hallway medicine and as we strive to bring more opportunity and less debt to students and deal with our electricity system that's costing far too much for everyone,
What,
as
by
we
making
put those plans
everything
in place, we're
free?
going to ask the richest
How are you going to
corporations
make the
and the
money
richest people amongst us to
to
pay a
level
little
the
bit more
budget
to help us pay
after
for that.
making
And our
everything free?
plan
Because
does
you're
show a
spending
trajectory down
money
to
to make
balance.
it free.
So once the family's stable,
Thank you,
we'll
Ms.
deal with the
Horvath.
deficit.
Doug Ford, it's your turn.
Oh, Martin, thanks for the question. I can tell you, my friend, everywhere I go, I've crisscrossed Ontario and I've asked people, do you think the government of Ontario wastes 4% of every single dollar? I've talked to tens of thousands of people and not one person has ever told me, no, they're efficient. Matter of fact, what we're going to do, we're going to bring outside auditors in to go line item by line item to find efficiencies. Our own Auditor General said she can find $1 billion with no one losing their jobs. But most importantly, do you know what I'm going to do, Martin? I'm going to go to the frontline workers. The frontline workers that understand their job better than anyone, because I've talked to them. There's endless efficiencies when I talk to the frontline workers. They're excited about the PC government coming in there and turning the ship around. We'll make sure it's easier and more affordable when you go out to buy a home
Ford,
under a PC
that's
government.
your time, Mr. Ford. Kathleen Wynne.
Thanks.
Okay, audience. Thank you, audience. Thank you.
Martin,
Wynne.
thanks for your question. And we've made a deliberate decision that having brought the books to balance in Ontario, that we are going to invest in people to make sure that people have the child care that they need, that families have the home care that they need. Because if we don't make those investments, there's actually a bigger debt that has to be paid down the line. The population is aging in this province, and we know that there's more support that families need who have young kids and may be looking after an elderly parent or grandparent. And so we're going to make those investments. We have a path to balance that's laid out in our budget. We are being very careful about the way we manage our fiscal house, which is the way we have been able to balance the budget. But if we don't invest in people, if we don't build that foundation for the future, then we're going to pay later. And so that's why we've made the decision to invest in people, to make sure we continue to have that highly skilled workforce that we already have in Ontario.
Thank you, Ms. Wynne.
And the care that people need.
Thank you, Ms. Wynne. 2.5 minutes, leaders of open debate. Andrea Horvath, you can start it off.
Well, I think it's important to know that folks like Martin are worried about what governments plan to do to pay for the things that they talk about. I know that young people are worried about a whole bunch of other things.
You don't even have a way to balance the budget.
We assume that young people are only worried about things like tuition fees. But we know that, in fact, young people are global citizens, and they're very, very concerned about a number of different issues. And I think Martin's question really illustrates exactly that. But we are in a situation in our province where the benefits of the prosperity that our province has been providing have been going to the few at the top as opposed to everyone else. And you don't have a situation where a mom who works full-time is forced to go to a food bank to feed her kids if the economy was working for families. And so we have to make sure not only that we have an economy that's working well, but that economy is ensuring that people have a decent quality of life.
Martin, let me just address to one of the specifics that we have in our platform, which is that as we overachieve, as we've done every year at the end of the year, overachieved on our targets, we've made a commitment to put all of that money, whether it's $2.5 billion, which is about what we've overachieved every year, that will go to debt repayment. But the other thing is that we need to make sure that you have all the supports that you need today. And I completely agree that one of the concerns of young people is the future. But the investments that we're making today, whether it's dealing with climate change, whether it's tuition being covered for low and middle income. And the fact is, we saw for the first time in 4 years a reduction in food bank usage. So we're actually seeing a plan that's working on all fronts.
Toronto became the child poverty capital of Canada.
Mr. Ford. Government, and make no mistake about it, it will be 10 times worse under the NDP, make 10 times worse. We have the largest subnational debt in the entire world, $346 billion. We're paying $12.5 billion of your money to service the debt. My friend, I travel around and I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of companies. They are terrified of the NDP coming in. They've told me personally, we will pack up and we will go down south in half a second. God forbid the NDP ever get in. They will destroy our province and destroy
such a scaremonger.
Our
and
economy.
that's our time
Absolutely
for this
destroy it.
question. Thank
That's
you.
fact.
Thank
That's
you.
real, my friend.
Our next question, Mr. Ford.
Thank
Mr.
you,
Ford,
Martin.
the next question's actually for you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tom Scanlon. I'm from Toronto. Mr. Ford, you are totally against the carbon tax, and you do not support wind power or other green initiatives. So here's my question. Do you believe in global warming? And if so, what concrete proposals do you have to tackle this issue?
Well, Tom, great question. And yes, I believe in global warming. I actually believe, Tom, in man-made global warming. But what I don't believe in, my friends, is putting an artificial tax called the carbon tax, the cap and trade, that does absolutely nothing, Tom, to help the environment. What it does, it hurts families. It drives up the cost of gas, drives up the cost of every single product you make. The carbon tax is the single worst tax anyone, not just in Ontario, Canada can ever have. It makes us uncompetitive against people around the world and south of the border. The cap and trade, I call it the big cap and trade scam. We're shipping, we're sending off hundreds of millions of dollars over to California for these so-called credits. It does nothing to help the economy whatsoever. It actually hurts families. It hurts every single person here, every person in Ontario, and it makes us uncompetitive.
Ms. Wynn, I
and
invite
it drives
you.
up
I
the
invite you
cost
to now
of
respond to
every
the same
single
question,
good.
please. Mr.
It's
Ford,
a
it's
terrible
Ms.
tax.
Mr. Ford.
A terrible
Mr.
tax.
Ford, it's Ms. Wynn's turn. Thank you.
So one of the reasons that we chose cap and trade in this province is that we worked with businesses, and businesses said cap and trade makes sense, because what cap and trade is about reducing carbon emissions, reducing greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change, and it's about the polluters paying. It's about the big polluters that are emitting paying, and they worked with us and they said, you know what, creating a market, and I actually would have thought, Mr. Ford, that you would get this and like this, a market that we've linked with Quebec and with California, a free market that allows businesses to operate and to buy those allowances and reduce their emissions and invest in technology, because that money goes back to them and it goes back to people to retrofit their houses. That's how the cap and trade system works. It tackles climate change, reduces pollution, and it actually puts the onus on the people who are producing that pollution to pay. It is.
That's your time, Ms. Wynn.
It is.
Ms.
Good.
Horvath, it's your turn to speak.
Thanks very much. We actually didn't have a problem with the idea of cap and trade. In fact, we supported the government's legislation. We were disappointed, though, that Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals didn't take our advice on a number of pieces, because what we had asked them to do is to take 25% of the revenues that come in from cap and trade to help communities and people in Ontario that struggle a little bit more. So, for example, lower income families, people who have a difficult time doing their part to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and their carbon footprint. So, Tom, we had hoped that a fairness measure would have been built in. Other jurisdictions have built in fairness measures to their programs. Unfortunately, that didn't happen here. So whether it's low-income families, whether it's, for example, remote communities in the Northwest or smaller rural communities in the northern parts of Ontario, or whether it's trade-exposed companies, we thought there should have been some fairness, some effectiveness measures built in, and some transparency that we don't see.
Time now for open debate. Mr. Ford, I invite you to get us started.
Let's be real here. The cap and trade takes $466 million out of businesses here and goes to California. I believe in keeping the $466 million here in Ontario to make sure we can invest in the people, invest in equipment, and create great paying jobs.
What's real is climate change, and we have to deal with it, Mr. Ford. Talk about getting real. What's real is climate change.
Let's let Ms. Horvath have a say, and then we'll have
let Ms. Wynne increase the carbon tax even higher with the NDP.
I think he talks so much he can't listen.
Let's let her have her time to
What I
respond.
was trying to say is that what's real, what we have to get real about is our responsibility in terms of our environment. What we have to get real about is making sure that we're taking proactive measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to reduce our carbon footprint. And our plan talks not only about that, about making it a more fair plan and building in the transparency that we need so that we can measure the effectiveness, but also about making sure, for example, that we're protecting our clean water sources. I mean, we have big companies that are coming into Ontario that are threatening municipal well systems, and there's nothing that's being done about that.
I'm going to stop you right there, Ms. Horvath. Ms. Horvath, I'm going to stop you right there and let Ms. Wynne have a say. Thank you.
All of those aspects are built into our plan. You know, the fairness, I assume, Andrew, that you're supportive of the millions of dollars that we have put from the cap and trade revenue into social housing retrofits. I assume that you support the fact that every dollar can be accounted for and that money goes back into people's hands to retrofit their houses. It goes back to businesses to create technology. I assume that beyond the cap and trade, that you support the Greenbelt and you support the protections and the broadening of the Greenbelt to protect our water source protection. Doug, you know, the reality is that the flooding and the fires that are happening across this world have to be dealt with. You have no plan to do that. We're the government that has brought in a plan that is actually dealing with that.
Let's let Mr. Ford respond.
We shut the coal-fired
Ms. Wynne,
plants.
we only have a few seconds left in this segment. Go ahead, Mr. Ford.
Well, again, I go back to we're losing jobs in the Green Energy Act. We should be keeping the money here. We shouldn't be sending it off to the U.S. With a carbon tax, it's the single worst tax ever on anything, on everyone. It's a terrible tax.
That is our time for this segment. We are going on to our next question. This is also from a member of the public. This one's coming in on video, so watch the monitors here in the studio. This is a voter from Ottawa, and here we go.
Hello, my name is Sherry Duplessis, and I live in Ottawa, Ontario. This is my question. What are you going to really do about hydro and these executives taking more and more money while the prices go up and up for all of us? Why is it that if they're fired or let go, they take away so much money? I served our country and I'm an injured vet with not a lot to live on. I could only dream of making a minuscule amount of money like them. They have a lot of people working for them that are never even noticed, yet they make a lot more money and they can give themselves more money. What are you going to do to help the people of Ontario truthfully?
Kathleen Wynne.
Sherry, thank you very much for that question, and thank you for serving the country. And we have reduced electricity bills by 25%. We recognize that all of the investment that we made to rebuild a system that was degraded when we came into office, that we had brownouts and blackouts, we've made that investment because previous governments hadn't. And that's actually not a partisan comment because NDP, Liberal, and Conservative governments didn't make those investments. But the salary that is being paid to the Hydro One executive, because I know that that is who the question is about, we have said that it was unacceptable. We've actually required that there is a review that would happen of that salary. We acted right away as soon as we had the information that that was the salary that was being voted in at the board. We made a statement that that review needed to happen, and that review is happening right now with outside objective advisors doing the review. It isn't acceptable. It was too much money, and that's why we exercise that authority.
Ms. Wynne, Ms. Horvath, it's your turn.
Well, I certainly hear your frustration, Sherry. We've seen this far too often. It's happened in our electricity system, which, by the way, the Conservatives started to privatize and deregulate in the 90s, and Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals have continued on that path with the privatization of Hydro One. And in fact, what we've discovered is that when that salary increase, at least for the board members that recently happened, the $25,000 boost that the board members voted for themselves for, apparently our government-appointed board members abstained from the vote. New Democrats have been hearing what you say, Sherry, very clearly, and have tried for years now to get the Liberal government to put a cap on those runaway salaries. But Mr. Ford talks about the $6 million man that Ms. Wynne has got at Hydro One. He's only going to replace that $6 million man with his own $6 million man and his own group of cronies, because he, as well as Kathleen Wynne, believe in the privatization of the hydro system. We don't.
Horvath. Doug Ford, please.
Well, first of all, thank you, Sherry, for your service. God bless you. Sherry, I'm the only one, as the NDP stood by and watched this go on for years after years after years, not saying a word. The $6 million man was brought to light under Doug Ford and the PCs.
Andrea Horvath, you are delusional.
Be gone on June the 7th, and the board that had their backroom deals to give themselves an increase. Just think of this. Wouldn't you love a job out there working 36 hours a year, 12 board meetings, and you're making $185,000? Under the NDP, under the Liberals, they condoned it. They just totally ignored it.
Wrong, Mr. Ford.
The NDP was down there watching it happen, not saying a word. I'm the only one that will get rid of the $6 million man.
You're not being truthful.
And get rid of the board and lower your hydro rates by 12%.
I don't know what's more dishonest. The Liberals being incompetent,
Kathleen Wynne, you can start it.
Or
you know, the electricity system in this province is it's a critical part of our infrastructure. And it was a mess in 2003. It was a mess because governments after governments had not made the investments that needed to be made. We've cleaned this electricity system up. We shut the coal fires.
Really?
We shut the
How do you
and you know what?
claim to back that up? If you privatized Hydro One,
and we did not.
You privatized Hydro One.
You want people to believe we sold the water, and we did not. You
sold it, you incompetent liar.
That in order to build roads and bridges,
not true, Kathleen.
That is absolutely
that is not true. In fact, the financial
oh, you're so-called elites.
That is the worst way to fund infrastructure projects. And in fact, the money that's come from Hydro One has not yet gone to any infrastructure projects.
Every dollar
that's sitting in the trust.
No,
excuse me. Audience, please. Kathleen Wynne to respond, then Doug Ford.
Every dollar that came from the broadening of the ownership of Hydro One is going to infrastructure. If it is not spent today,
you privatized Hydro.
All of those projects. And Andrea,
Ms. Horvath, let her finish, please.
The reality is, not only did we have to clean up the electricity system, we also had to build infrastructure that had not been built. Holes had been filled in on roads that the Tories were going to build subways on. We had not built infrastructure in this province for years. So yes, we found a way to raise taxes on the richest people.
Where is your proof, woman?
And we leveraged an asset that the people of Ontario own to build new assets for the people of Ontario. That's what we did.
Doug Ford.
Well, Sherry, I'm the only one. I'm the only one that's going to reduce your hydro rates. I'm the only one that's going to get rid of the $6 million man and replace them like Quebec Hydro is $550,000 a year. I'm going to make sure I get rid of the board. But even the Auditor General said we overpaid $9.2 billion on renewable energy. That's the problem. The Green Energy Act is an absolute scam. Nothing but a scam. And Sherry, people like yourself, you're paying for it. We are not competitive anywhere in North America. We have the highest hydro rates in North America. We can't compete. I will make sure we compete. I'll make sure we create great paying jobs.
You got to tell the truth, Doug. You got to tell the truth.
Fact.
That's our time for this segment. Our next
telling the
question from the
truth.
audience goes to
Everyone
you,
else is
Horvath.
delusional. I'm pretty sure everyone might as well be delusional.
Hello, my name is Peter Spite. I live in Toronto. My question is this. My wife and I have struggled to find an infant spot for our son, and for the past 2 years, we've been paying over $20,000 a year in daycare. Because of the high costs and lack of childcare spaces, we cannot afford to have any more children. Will you and your party commit to immediately making childcare more affordable and work to make more spots by publicly funding childcare programs instead of individuals by putting in place low fees or no fees for parents?
Thanks, Peter. I appreciate the question, and I have to say it's got to be a heart-wrenching decision to want to have a growing family and know that the thing that's restricting that dream from happening is the cost of childcare in Ontario. And unfortunately, not only your family, but many families in Ontario are facing the same thing. There's a severe shortage of licensed quality childcare in Ontario, and it's very unaffordable. So my answer is yes, our plan does exactly do that. And not only does it provide an average of $12 a day or less for 70% of families needing childcare, under 40,000 completely free, but we focus our plan to start with infants and toddlers.
You're spending taxpayers' money to make it free.
Workforce to pull up their income and get back to a family budget that's something that they can handle. And so we are looking forward to being able to not only provide the affordability, but build 202,000 spaces of new childcare.
Ms. Horvath, thank you. Mr. Ford, your response, please.
Well, Peter, we're the only ones with a plan that actually focuses on children from 0 to 15 years of age. Under the NDP and under the Liberals, it's again government run. Peter, I believe you should have the choice. You should have the choice. We are offering $6,750 per child to go and get a babysitter, get a nanny, go to the daycare of your choice, not a government-run one. If you want to go to, in the summer, put your kids in a day camp, you can do that under their plan. You can't do that. And by the way, for the millions of people that are out there that working afternoons and evenings, their plan doesn't work. It's a government-run daycare system that people don't want to put their kids in, and it's open from 8 in the morning to 4:30. Ours, you can use it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, because we believe you should have a choice, not the government.
Ms. Nguyen, it's your turn now to respond.
So, Peter, this is a really serious concern, and we've been building the system by putting in place full-day kindergarten, building 100,000 childcare spaces, and now we're taking the next step, because I've talked to families for whom the decision about daycare is going to determine whether they have another child or not. The ability to find daycare is about that. So the reality is that you have to build the system that is going to work. And so the difference between what the NDP is suggesting and what we're suggesting is that we have talked to the experts, we've looked at the capacity in the system, and we're providing free preschool childcare from 2.5 to 4, and we're working with all of the providers that are licensed. So whether it's not for profit or profit, or whether it is in a school, wherever it is, or whether it's in a home. And the difference is that the NDP, because of their ideology, won't work with for-profit or private.
Thank you for your answer. We're going to open up the floor for debate. And Ms. Horvath, if you could get us started, please.
I want to start by saying I'm proud of the fact that I don't think people should be reaping profits off the care of our children. I don't think that that's a positive thing. And in fact, it's very clear that the not-for-profit sector, and it's shown in all of the studies, provides about a 15% quality edge over for-profit services. And so I want the highest quality childcare for our children in Ontario, and that's what our plan provides. But it also provides an acknowledgement that we want moms to be able to go back to work early if they so choose. It not only helps the family, but it also helps the economy. And it helps to deal with something that I know the Liberals talk about a lot, which is pay equity.
And the best way to get to pay equity is having women back in the workforce. If we are going to deal with the gender wage gap, you're absolutely right, Andrea. We have to help women get back to work. But to characterize small, really well-run, licensed for-profit childcares as somehow reaping benefits off the backs of kids it's just a mischaracterization. That's not how it works. The reality is there are great businesses all over the province that are small childcares. As long as they're licensed, they should have a chance to provide that child care. And that's the difference between you and me. I'm looking for the fairest, most practical solution, and you're looking for the purest ideological solution.
I'm looking for the highest quality for our kids.
To make sure we do the best for the kids.
Let's let Mr. Ford have his say on this subject, please.
Peter, the difference is once your child turns 4 or 5, they're done. They're done with their plans. Our plan goes up to the age of 15. You want to put your children in a government daycare, or would you rather have a choice? We believe in letting the people have a choice rather than the government telling you where you should have your son or daughter taken care of.
How much is your rebate, Doug? How much is your rebate? About $2,000? It's not going to help with your $20,000 of childcare costs.
And by the way, you don't have to be there from 8 o'clock in the morning to 4:30 because we know the government shuts down after 4:30, 5 o'clock.
Oh.
If you work night times, you work afternoons.
Have you ever been to a daycare?
You will be able to.
Apparently not.
4:30.
I'm planning to go down to Queen's Park.
That's our time, leaders. That is our time for that segment. We're going on back to Eastern Ontario for our next question from the members of the public. This is someone from Nepean, Ontario. Mr. Ford, you'll get the first chance to answer, again, via video. Let's go.
My name is Daljit Singh Nirman from Nepean, and my question to all the leadership candidates is, can you please explicitly outline your plan of action in improving the deteriorating Ontario healthcare? In particularly, what concrete and practical steps would be initiated towards reducing the wait time in the emergency room of the hospitals and specialist appointments?
Mr. Ford.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the question. We have the greatest healthcare team we've ever put together, headed up by Dr. Ruben Devlin, the former CEO of Humber River Hospital. My friends, he's compiled the best doctors, because I've always said we have the best doctors and the best nurses and the best frontline healthcare workers there ever is. Unfortunately, these same doctors and nurses and frontline healthcare workers have been beaten down under this Liberal government for 15 years. We're going to make sure that we listen to the frontline doctors and the nurses. We're going to listen to the nurses. And when the economy gets going, we're going to hire more nurses, because we are creating 30,000 new long-term care beds in 10 years. We're putting $1.9 billion to mental health, addiction, and housing. We're going to make sure that we take care of seniors, the most vulnerable seniors out there. We'll take care of their
that's your time. Kathleen Wynne.
100,000 seniors.
Kathleen Wynne. Audience, thank you. Kathleen Wynne.
Valjit, thank you for asking the question. It's so important to our society, our healthcare system. My dad and my grandfather were both family docs, and I watched them and listened to them tell stories about people who had to leave baked goods on the front step because they couldn't pay for their healthcare visits. So our healthcare system is a treasure, and we have invested in it every single year. But the reality is that our population is aging, and there's more that we have to do. We are committing $822 million to hospitals. That's on top of $500 million that we put in our budget last year that hospitals saw. We've worked with the Ontario Hospital Association to make sure that they have what they need. But mental health supports are huge. $2.1 billion we're committing to mental health supports. We know that there's a need for more home care. It's not a single thing that needs to be done. We have to work on all of these fronts to make sure that we meet the needs of everyone in the province.
Andrea Horvath.
Valjit, you brought a question forward that is on the minds of every Ontarian that I talk to when they see the anguish that family members are put through watching their loved ones in hallways in hospitals with no dignity, with no privacy, with noise and commotion 24 hours a day, and sometimes they're in those hallways for days and days and days on end. It is a horrifying situation. Nobody should have to go through that, and nobody should have to watch their loved one deal with that kind of care in a hospital. And it's not the frontline workers. The nurses and doctors and PSWs and all of the hospital staff are beside themselves with anxiety and angst about the mess in our hospitals. You can't freeze hospital budgets for 5 years and not expect this kind of thing to happen. So we will fund them properly. We're going to have a moratorium on any further layoffs. We're going to fund long-term care and home care to make sure all of us have the kind of quality health care that we deserve.
2.5 minutes of open debate, starting with Doug Ford.
Well, first of all, more than 4,300 patients at Brampton Civic Hospital were dealt with in the hallways. We're going to end hallway health care once and for all. And the way we're going to end it is by getting input by the doctors and the nurses. Not a bunch of politicians that they think they know better than the doctors or nurses from Queen's Park We're actually going to get input from the frontline healthcare workers, the nurses, and the doctors.
I just had
We're
a
going to
round
need
table with
more
those folks.
nurses. We're going to need more nurses because the economy is going to grow. We're going to need more nurses to take care of the 30,000
Kathleen Wynne,
long-term care beds.
Kathleen Wynne.
Doug, you could have had those conversations, then you could have had a platform written. Because the fact is that that's actually how you write policy. That's how you develop a platform and policies. You talk to the people in the field. You understand what they're going through. And we have increased funding every single year in our healthcare system.
You don't just talk to them, though, Kathleen. You have to listen to them.
Exactly.
And when they were sounding the alarm bells about your cuts to our hospital system, you ignored them and you continued to freeze those budgets. And now we have a terrible situation in our hospitals. They are not funded the way that they should be. Even this current budget, you shorted the hospitals by $300 million from what they had asked.
Yeah, so
that's why our loved ones are not getting what they need.
I am the first to admit that there's more that we need to do in healthcare, including hospitals, which is why $822 million is allocated. But every single year in our budgets, we have increased the funding to healthcare. The reality is more people want care at home. We've put billions of dollars into home care. Mental health is an area that is much more, we're much more aware of the needs there, and we're increasing funding to mental health.
Last 25 to Mr. Ford.
Well, every single one of us rely on doctors. We have the greatest doctors and nurses in the entire world. My friends, call up your doctor when you're calling up your employer and ask them who they support to run the healthcare system. They'll say the PC government. Very simple. They'll say the PC government overwhelmingly. The doctors support.
That's not what they said when I had a round table with them.
That's
about
really. It is now time for our final question. Audience, if I could ask you to please refrain from your applause because we have our final question. It's for Ms. Wynne.
My name's Bob Hamilton. I'm from Toronto. Each of you have had a negative legacy from a previous government to overcome. Kathleen Wynne as Dalton McGuinty and the gas plant scandal. Andrea Horwath, you have Bob Ray and Ray Days. Doug Ford, you've got Mike Harris and cuts to health care and education. I'd like to know what you can do to reassure voters, if elected, that history will not repeat itself.
Bob, that is a great question. And I think it points to what I said earlier about things get very partisan in an election period, but people really see government as an entity that should be doing the things that are going to meet their needs. And so when I became the leader, when I became the premier of this province, I worked to resolve the issues that were confronting me. And so we changed the rules around the Green Energy Act. We made it clear that we understood that there had been problems with the way information was dealt with during the whole discussion around gas plants, and we changed the rules. And that's how I have operated. I have, when there's been a challenge that has confronted me, whether it's something that was left over from my predecessor or whether it's a new challenge, I have looked to find the way to put in place a structure that's going to allow for the problem to be solved and for us to go forward in the most open, fairest way possible.
It's your turn to answer this question.
Thanks very much, and I appreciate the question, Bob. And I think it speaks to something we were talking about a little early on, and that is the cynicism that people end up feeling when they elect governments expecting them to fulfill their promises and then only discover that, in fact, those promises don't get fulfilled. And what I can tell you is this: that's why we worked so hard on putting our platform together. We worked on it for about 2 years, and it is a very detailed platform, and it talks not only about the things that we believe we can do to make life better for families in Ontario, but also how we pay for that. So there's no surprises. We actually launched the platform a couple of weeks before the election even took place, and some of our plans have been online for a couple of years now, like our hydro plan, for example. Because it really should be about transparency and giving people the opportunity to engage with potential governments, with leaders, with parties, about what the future is that we can build together. Because that's what it has to be about, building our future together.
Thank you, Ms. Horwath. Mr. Ford, your response, please.
Well, Bob, I appreciate the question because I don't trust politicians either. I say that publicly. I don't see eye to eye with a bunch of politicians. I'm the only person up here that actually, Bob, has the track record of what we say we're going to do. We did. We said we're going to save the taxpayers money in the city of Toronto. We saved them $1.16 billion. We made sure the city was booming. I have a proven track record. And Bob, I can tell you, when I tell the people out there, not one single person in Toronto lost their job, and I'll tell you, not one single person will lose their job in Ontario. Don't believe the dishonest NDP when they run these scare tactics. The only people that are going to lose their job is when the economy plunges under the NDP. It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying to the people of Ontario. And Bob, you lived through it. People are terrified, economically disaster under the NDP. I'm actually scared about it.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Thank you, Mr. Ford.
Yeah.
Ms. Wynn?
I don't want another 4 years of Liberals.
So
And
I just
I'm
want to
pretty
go
sure the
back
NDP
to,
is just going
back
to
to what
make
Bob
everything
said.
even worse.
In a leadership role, you have to take responsibility for everything that's on your plate. And some of what's on your plate got there because of what other people did, and some of what's on your plate got there because of things that you've done. But no matter what's there, you have to be upfront with people. You have to say, this is what I understand the situation to be, and this is what I'm doing about it. And you know, that's about changing rules in government. It's about reversing decisions. It's about apologizing when there are challenges. There are things that shouldn't have happened. But at the end of the day, it's about finding solutions that are fair for the greatest number of people, and doing that by talking to the people who have the solutions, talking to people who are smarter than we are, and making sure that the decision fits the problem.
Let's get
and that's exactly what I have work to do.
Ms. Horvath and then Mr. Ford in on this discussion.
Well, again, it's really about engaging people in the vision that they want to see in the future of the province, and that's what our plan does. And you know, well, I know Mr. Ford's using some pretty strong language around what our plan is, but our plan's pretty fundamental, and that is every single decision that government makes has to have the people at the heart of that decision, and it shouldn't be about trying to get a bump in the polls, and it shouldn't be about manipulating the timing so that it looks good on you for an election. It should mean every single day, every single week, every single month, and every single year in the 4 years of a mandate that you have, you should be putting the best interests of people at the heart of every single decision making.
Mr.
And
Ford,
I think
you get the last 30
fact
seconds.
that people don't see that
Mr.
is
Ford?
what makes them disappointed in government.
Bob, is very simple. Who do you trust with your investments? Who would you hand your wallet over to? The NDP, the Liberals, or the PC? I could ask the majority of the province this, and I know what the answer is going to be. They don't trust the NDP. Businesses, Bob, are terrified. I can't stress that enough. They're terrified.
How do you trust
and they
somebody
will be
without a
leaving.
platform? Who do you trust with your children, Doug?
Who
do you trust with your parents, Doug?
You lost 125,000 jobs, and you lost 300,000 jobs.
We're just getting rolling, and now we're out of time. Friends, that is it for this round and for this debate. I wonder if this audience would join us in thanking Kathleen Wynne, Doug Ford, and Andrea Horvath for participating in tonight's Leaders Debate.
Thank you to our audience here. Thank you to our audience at home. And on behalf of Steve and I, thank you for everyone who sent in questions. You took the time to think of these questions and to send them to us. And remember, advance polls are already open.
And vote June 7th.
That's right. Take
June
the time.
7th.
Get out and vote.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for having us. Good night.
Good night.
You can stay in the know anytime, anywhere with the free CBC News app. All the local, national, international, and breaking news you need. Download it today.
Well, there you go, the third and final debate for the Ontario leaders as they get ready for Election Day, just 11 days away now, 10 days of campaigning left. The debate may be over, but it's not the last we'll see of the leaders tonight. We are expecting that they will come out and answer a couple of reporter questions over the course of the next hour, and we're going to bring you those scrums live to you as well. We're also going to bring you, of course, some context and analysis that you need with our expert team. So let's start that debrief with our panel. NDP strategist Brad Living in Toronto, Conservative strategist Chad Rogers in Toronto, and Liberal strategist Rob Silver in Ottawa. I'm going to start. I'm not sure Rob can hear us yet, so I'm not going to start there because then he won't have a chance to weigh in. But let me play this clip because it's how the debate started. And it was an interesting moment for Kathleen Wynne, something that she has sort of hinted at in some of the ads and some of the lines that she's been giving over the past week or so. But she was blunt and came right out of the gate saying this. Take a listen.
Sorry, not sorry. I'm really genuinely sorry that more people don't like me. But I am not sorry about all of the things that we're doing in Ontario.
All right, so that concludes the debate. They just have their personal analysis and post-debate stuff. But, well, time to hit the box and get on with, you guessed it, the very first episode of the podcast, The Voice of Kwokamole. And yes, indeed, Ontario politics is the topic. That's just fit because of that debate. Well, what can I say? That was one heck of a show. Everyone's arguing in different directions. And you know what? It's hard to really get a real grasp at what everyone wants. The Liberals, PCs, and NDP every day. Got this, got that. Well, I can't really say anything much about it. But I should say before I officially start going deep in, is that this following podcast may contain some uncensored, unscripted comments. So, I'm warning you now, if you're sensitive to that, please avoid it. Yeah, I've been warned about this. I may go unfiltered. Alright, so let's begin. Just on chat. Only one person watching. But, anyways, let's go. Alright, warnings on the chat. And now, we get to start. Officially. So, Doug Ford always keeps repeating himself saying that he's for the little people. He's for the little guy. He's for the people. Well, that's a sensible thing. Kathleen Wynne's opening statement saying, "Sorry, not sorry." Oh, that was such a joke, I'm telling you. That was just, what the heck? And We might as well be going Quidditch like that, if you know what I mean. But, well, what can I say? We got many other things to go. Anyway, so we have 11 days before June 7th strikes, which is the provincial general election in Ontario. And, of course, things have been crazy. In just the, all over the place when it comes to these debates, but honestly, you need to be aware of what each government promises. So, it's all trust, and more trust. Do you trust them? Do you not? Do you want them to win? Do you want them to lose? Well, it's really hard to say. But I'm just going to start off by talking about the polls, because that's actually been quite a lot of influence, where most of the influence lies, more like. So, earlier during the pre-show, I mentioned the NDP had a 36% poll average. The PCs had been losing support because of some scandals, including the 407 data breach, Highway 407. The Liberals have lost their footing constantly. They went down to 21%. Green Party, 5.5%. And other parties, they include a whole lot. There's Ontario Alliance, Ontario Moderate Party, there's even an Ontario Communist Party. There's so many small minor parties going on. And actually, in my area, my riding is Mississauga Erin Mills. It used to be called Mississauga Erindale, but then it got dissolved and divided into 3 different ridings. But there's a Libertarian candidate in my riding. I'm voting this year, so I know that I will be able to let my voice be heard. 1.6% of the average is in favor of other small parties. Well, other small parties really have nothing because they only have a small base, but that's about it. They don't really have much policy stance, or basically, they're not really an identity. The Green Party is really just the small minor party that keeps popping up, even though they are one of the smallest recognized parties when it comes to voting. They'll usually be in 4th place on average. But, as always, the lead has been shrinking for PCs. They've only been leading since Friday. But they've been gradually gaining support. They passed the Liberals actually around the first or second week of May. They'd already gotten past the Liberals. Unfortunately, how the votes work out, it's not exactly how, you wouldn't compare it to how the U.S. presidential election happened. And quite frankly, it's an interesting way. So, like, you can win a lot of seats, but even winning the most amount of seats doesn't always assure that you will have a majority government. That's confusing, honestly. But the chances of a PC majority, I hope they'll remain mostly in favor, even though the poll here says that there's a 77.4% chance of the Progressive Conservatives winning the majority. So, having looked through the platform of each candidate, well, kind of disregarding the Green Party, because they barely exist in the provincial legislature. But honestly, it's how it will play out that really matters. Because you can't just convince people and then just say barely anything. Well, like I'd said, the NDP and the Liberals are pretty much the same political ideology. Left wing. Well, center left. Center left, center-ish. Well, more center left. It's what values they really have. The PCs don't exactly have a clear platform, though, because they're still trying to sort everything out. So, really, the Liberals are going to be spending for straight sets of time. Several years of spending, which means plenty of deficits, and then balance the budget about 7 years from now. So, have deficits basically until, I think they said they wanted to run deficits for like 3 years or something like that, 2-3 years, and balance it. Who are they kidding? The Liberals have lost their support. There's a lot of factors. I don't know which factors are exactly influential, but it's pretty obvious that there are so many factors that are affecting how the Liberals are doing. I'm pretty sure the strike that had happened last fall in 2017, the college strike, I'm pretty sure that has an influential factor. From what I know, the millennial voter turnout is really low, but that's really like a case of probably insecurity over who to vote. I don't know, but some statements are ideal, some are not. I can't really say much about it. But if the Liberals are going to be spending, the PCs say that they want to quickly balance the books and leave it balanced. But that would include a deficit for the first year. But if there's not really a clear idea of how that budget is going to be balanced, then it's really questionable about how this is going to play out. But an external audit to investigate spending is really questionable too. The NDP wants to rule massive deficits. I'm pretty sure they're probably planning to run deficits longer than the Liberals. They want 5 consecutive deficits, and then also they want to make a lot of things free. They want free education. Like, literally, they want to take all student loans and turn them into grants. Hello? How are you going to get the money to do that? All you're doing is just spending, spending, spending. The NDP is literally playing make it rain. Literally and figuratively. Because this is the taxpayers' money, this is the NDP's hand, and here we go. Literally, it's raining money. Hello, how are you gonna get the money to do that? You're just gonna be borrowing more money, going lower and lower in the red, aka more debt. We're already at, what, 325, no, I don't know how many, but it's probably about 325, 350, like 325 or 350, I think, billion dollars of debt. Million or billion, I don't know the exact figure. Oh boy. But you want to make a lot of things free. You want to expand healthcare and make it free. Free, free, free. Okay, there's free speech, but there's no such damn thing as a free lunch. So, at one point, everyone needs to pay for something. You can't just make everything free and then expect everyone to be happy. It's just, it doesn't make sense. The Liberals, they want to expand OHIP Plus, which is basically free prescription healthcare, to seniors that are over 65. Okay, we already have free health care for people, well, for children until they turn 25. And basically, that's what they want to do. Well, I don't really want to fall for it. So, it's just complicated. Oh boy. There's going to be more debt, more spending, more deficits. Well, everyone called out the NDP for a large calculating mistake. But it's just pretty strange. Well, Doug Ford will release the platform, but it's hard to say. I don't know though, honestly. There are some decisions that the Liberals made that really just made others cringe. I think one of the biggest things was the sex ed reform. That was probably like one of the biggest mistakes that the Liberals made. Because, let's face it, you're telling kids that are 5 or 6 reproductive parts. Well, not exactly. Here's, well, kind of, because you want to teach the kids what else than the human body. You also want them to learn the words penis and vagina. That's, I'm pretty sure, too graphic for a 6 or 7-year-old kid, because that's privacy. That's really, are kids mature enough to know about this yet? I doubt it. I don't think so. The sex ed reform is full of things that really, I'm pretty sure it's like, I'd say it would corrupt young people's mind in a way. That's like, why are my, like a parent would probably be going around asking, why is my kid talking about private parts at such a young age, and why are they trying to do things that are weird? Like, it's okay to bring more awareness into what the modern trends are, especially since some cases of sexual abuse and sexual assault include, like, just plain indecent things. And then you also have sexting, which basically, as a matter of fact, if you send or receive an indecent image, that's actually already basically defined as possession of pornography. No matter whether it's a child or an adult, you get a naked picture from someone or you take a naked picture and send it out, that's already possession of pornography. So, the question is, why are we getting so graphic at such a young age? We don't need this yet. Also, like, no one is completely fit in the head. Not everyone is stable. So, it's really just a case of how are things really going to play out? This is like the biggest mudslinging that's happening. I can't really find the right words, but honestly, everything that goes on is just, it kind of gets in the wrong direction, in a way. Like, nothing is kind of right. So, Doug Ford, he's been repeating himself a lot, based on what I've been hearing. He's saying the same things over and over again, but I think he's trying to make a statement with some of his points. He did most of the calling out on the NDP's error, and honestly, some of his answers were not even relevant to the questions that were asked. The Liberals, I don't want to say I like them, but I kind of feel like saying that they are not going to be successful. Well, they won't be anyways, because Kathleen Wynne's approval rating was pretty low. And really, everything just wasn't like, it didn't sort out. Yeah, I'm talking about something that's almost 30 years old. I'm talking about 1990, when the Liberals were completely unpopular. The PCs had just, well, the Conservatives, I don't know whether they had referred to themselves as the PCs in the 90s. But the Conservatives and the Liberals were in the low. Well, the Liberals were in the low much worse than the Conservatives, because apparently the Conservatives had just elected their new leader. The Liberals were extremely hated. And then Bob Rae was the leader of the NDP. Everyone, well, a lot of people voted NDP. And the Liberals lost their status as a party because they had less than 5 seats. They were embarrassed that election. The NDP became a majority, but it turned out to be the biggest mistake of their life for everyone that voted NDP, because they started doing things that were not expected. It's kind of old-fashioned for Doug Ford to mention something from 30 years ago, but it kind of makes sense, because even though Andrea Horwath says that she is no Bob Rae, and Bob Rae is now a Liberal, not everything really works out. I didn't say that, because really, I can't really go and say much about everything. Well, it's hard to say. Everything just goes all over the place. Especially since everything is out of order here and there. Well, I can't really give every single detail, but the thing is, how do you expect everything to sort itself out? A lot of people are kind of uncertain. Well, this year, Kathleen Wynne is completely unpopular. Doug Ford has been leading the PCs since less than half a year. I think he's been leading for only about 3 months at the least. But then we also have the NDP, who claim to be an alternative. Why are we even in this kind of a mess? Because everything is crazy. I have no confidence in the Liberals. All that confidence faded away after the province-wide college strike. The NDP only want deals. They said, this is Andrea Horwath's exact opinion. She would not enact back-to-school legislation, back-to-work legislation, because it is totally against their values. They are center-left, but I feel like they're more regular left-wing than center-left. The Liberals, on the other hand, they let the college strike drag on for 5 weeks before they said enough is enough, we need to legislate them back to work. The NDP rejected each attempt at back-to-work legislation. And basically, if an NDP government formed a majority, the problem is York University is on strike. And they've been on strike for 10 to 12 weeks. Something like that. I know it's over 10 weeks. But unfortunately, if the NDP government formed a majority, this strike going on at York will go on and on and on until a deal is made. And who knows how long it will take before a deal is made. There may never be a deal. The strike could go on for ages and ages. This is like a very mind-boggling thing, which really is just a total disaster. Now, the NDP has come under fire for some things that really are outrageous. Let me start with this one. An NDP candidate said that poppies are war glorification. They glorify the reason that people went to war? What? Who in the minds of minds would think that that wearing a poppy is a bad thing? The poppy is meant to remember the soldiers that sacrificed their goddamn life for freedom in our country. I support freedom. I'm pretty sure everyone supports freedom. Like, oh, we have a question. What's your ideology? Well, I'm actually center-right-ish. I'm more center-right by thought, but yeah, ideology-wise, I'm center-right, and I do possess, though, a lot of center-wing values. It's not really that poppies are actually just a commemoration of sorts. Because, let's face it, John McCrae wrote this, and it is appreciated that in Flanders Fields is very well known, especially for people that always remember on Remembrance Day the importance of veterans. So, if you're going to call soldiers war criminals, you might as well be a pacifist that really just wants nothing to do with the army. Nothing to do with violence. Nothing to do with, well, anything involving, like, really radical. Okay, Druid says I'm a libertarian leftist, anti-communism, anti-fascist, but I hate communism. Well, Antifa. More like. Antifa is really, how do I say it? Well, Antifa basically is anti-fascist, but Antifa is too radical in the left wing, I feel like. They are honestly trying to cause trouble. I know they've been causing trouble in the States because they don't like everything. Someone asked under review, use some mind of fag. Well, Dan Marcus, Daniel Nickus, you can screw off, and you can honestly go away. Because that is not cool. You don't call someone a fag. Never. Because that is a kind of homophobic insult. To call someone a faggot. That is the worst thing you can ever say. What if you were someone that was homosexual and I called you a faggot? Would you like it? No, I'm pretty sure not. So, you're more than welcome to go and pick on someone your own size. Anyways, back to the podcast. I hate people that really just ask inconsiderate stuff. Antifa is just too radical, and it's not what I want to see really, because you say you're anti-fascist, but you act weird. Kind of, in a way, contradictory. Well, I can only say that, Druid says, Antifa are fascism. Kind of, but like, they are rather contradictory. Because they say they're against fascists, but they don't really have ideal thoughts. I'll say that. But the way I see it is that everything that they kind of do, it's just not really, it's not, I can't really come to a conclusion about it, but like, I don't like it. On the other hand, well, let's get back to this. But wearing poppies is important because these are people that sacrificed their lives, dead or alive, that we are talking about. Dead soldiers, injured soldiers, retired soldiers, you name it. They served in the army for freedom, for the purpose of freedom, that every Canadian citizen can be thankful that they are free. Now, there's even another hilarious one. Another NDP candidate, this one though from Scarborough Agincourt, well, running in that riding, she shared a Adolf Hitler meme on Facebook several years back. Anti-Semitism festering in the NDP? Well, the left always say that if you don't agree with us, then you're a racist, a fascist, a misogynist, a bigot. Whatever kind of insulting name they can throw at you, they will throw it at you. That's what the left really are, unfortunately. Like, you need to have an open mind for the sake of humanity. You need to be able to know what's good, what's not good, what's really ideal. So, there's a social meme shared by the Scarborough Agincourt NDP candidate, Taslim Riaz. Sounds like someone of South Asian descent, I'm guessing. The Facebook post features a quote that is commonly attributed to Hitler overlaid over a photo of the tyrannical despot giving a Nazi salute to a gathered crowd. A title over the image reads, "The ruler said about rule." If you don't like a rule, just follow it, reach on the top, and change the rule. Is attributed to Hitler, even though there's no evidence that Hitler ever actually said that. That is really like, everyone's reserved to their own opinion, but it gets really finicky when others don't agree with your opinion. Thing is, you need to be open to opinions no matter what ideology you belong in. You can't just close your mind. Let's say, for example, if you're a liberal, if you're liberal-minded, that you shut yourself in your liberal world and you shut out the NDP, you shut out the conservatives. All you only care about is liberals. You can't convince everyone. You can't make everyone like you. That's the thing about it. Like, it's just messed up. Also, a laissez-faire approach to dealing with candidates who express controversial views is really not really, like, it's irreversible. You're affecting other people's opinions about the NDP. If I'm gonna vote, if I was an NDP supporter and I found out about this, I would probably be like, Andrea Horvath, why are you letting this candidate say something that's offensive to an ethic, to an ethical religion? Okay, Adolf Hitler was a fascist. We all know that. He persecuted Jewish people. We all know that. But for someone in the 21st goddamn century to post a meme which may or may not have an anti-Semitic reference to it, but it's a reference to Hitler. Of all people, it has to refer to Hitler, even though there's no proof that Hitler said it himself. There's no proof of that. Yet, one sight of that tiny stashed psychopath by the name of Adolf Hitler, a Jewish person would be offended. That's what I'm trying to say. It's just, no. No one wants to be like that. No one wants to be discriminated. It's kind of like discriminating there. And then that same candidate says the liberals and conservatives support troops who slaughter innocent men, women, and children. Okay. Honestly, what the heck are you trying to say here? Because is there proof that innocent people are hurt by these attacks? There may be some civilian casualties by accident, but there are missions to take out hostiles for a reason. In a statement, Reyes says she is horrified that an inappropriate meme was on my Facebook page and she cannot understand how it happened. You cannot understand how it happened? You posted it, you sick person. You are a contradictory person. And if I were an NDP supporter, I would just not trust Andrea Horvath. Because she's defending. Believe me, she is defending people messed up. Because politicians are playing influences, and so is censorship. No. But honestly, all over the place, unfortunately. There's liberal influence in a lot of things, especially in social media. You'd think that news is fair, but even news agencies have a tendency to be biased. Because they're paid to broadcast, but what they say sometimes is filtered, sometimes just lacks some specific things. Some things just don't appear, some things are just who knows where they are. I don't support it, but everything is pretty messed up. Censorship is like one of the biggest things that influences how we think. Unfortunately, it's true, but it's how we have to deal with it. Because, of all things, we can't really set much stuff. Well, I don't really know if I can really come to a conclusion of who won that debate, but with June 7th coming up fast, I know where I'm voting. I won't be mentioning it here, but as long as everything is just ordinary, I suppose, then things are kind of fine. Well, if I can really say though, the chance of NDP minority could be questionable. If the NDP form a minority, I don't really know what I can say. If the NDP are able to form a majority, it'll be a disaster for Ontario. Basically, Ontario is going to go to hell. And if the Liberals win, God forbid, I don't want the Liberals to win because after 15 years, I think they have to go. The NDP and Liberals have already made it clear that they do not want to form a coalition. So that's really going to throw the odds in jeopardy. However, the PCs, although they're slipping in polls now, a minority, PC minority, could be questionable because there will be a lot of ideology opposition. I'm only hoping for a PC majority. I think that kind of hints at where I'm voting-ish. But the way I look at this, I'm only hoping that the PCs will win because they seem like the most competent, unfortunately, for those that are anyone but Ford. I'm anyone but Win, but whatever, I do not want the NDP to win as well. I'm hoping for the PCs, and that is that. Well, what can I say? It's really a complicated mess. So, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode, whatever the subject is. Thank you for watching, once again, signing off.